Chapter 301. Dustless's eyes revealed a scarlet ambition that could devour everything. His face was full of fanaticism. If he could get all the chakra in the world and be a savior at the same time, it would be the best, even if it was just an empty title. Wasn't the reason why people live to become outstanding? Although Dustless has obtained countless chakra in the past, especially after defeating Obito, he obtained the 10-tailed chakra in his body, and the content reached an unprecedented level. However, as the saying goes, humans are greedy, and Dustless is naturally the same. It would be best if he could have more 10-tailed in his body. You are twisting words. After a while, Kakashi recovered from his trance and argued with a red face. Even if he agreed with Dustless's statement in his heart, he still had to stick to his position. After all, they were now in a hostile state, and it was impossible to do such a thing as throwing herself at him. This is an undeniable fact, Kakashi. I don't mind telling you, the so-called chakra is the source of human evil. Since the energy of chakra appeared in this world, the remaining people in the world have been living in the cage of chakra, and they have been confined in the cage of chakra. This was the truth. Dustless was not lying. Since Kaguya touched the sacred tree, the curse began, and it shrouded the world like a nightmare. The initiator was Kaguya's son, Otsutsuki Hagoromo, the legendary Six Paths Sannin. If he didn't unravel the true meaning of chakra and teach it to ordinary humans, the simple humans might not have fallen into the shackles of human nature. Humans are greedy. Once they have power, it is inevitable that they would let their imaginations run wild and go astray. They would not be satisfied with their current situation and have evil thoughts. Once they have evil thoughts, it is inevitable that they would reach out to others to satisfy their own material and spiritual needs. In this way, humans would be trapped in the endless entanglement of cause and effect. Naturally, evil would arise. I'm sure you've heard of the legend of the Sage of Six Paths, but I'm sorry to tell you that the Sage of Six Paths actually lived for thousands of years. He was the one who taught the essence of chakra to the world. Some people think that he's a super existence like the god of creation, but I don't think so. Ignoring Kakashi's shock, Dustless frowned and sneered. The Sage of Six Paths had hoped that chakra could communicate everything and become a bridge between each other's hearts. Thousands of years of war have silently proved that everything the Sage of Six Paths did was wrong. Dustless's cold eyes blazed as he said in a loud voice, "Now my purpose is very simple and straightforward. That is to once again recover the world's chakra, so that the entire world can be free from the nightmare of chakra. It should not be an exaggeration to call me the new god of creation, Kakashi." Distorting the truth, I'm sorry to tell you, although what you said before is very right and very reasonable, but it is undeniable that what Dustless said before is very reasonable. Without the energy of chakra, many problems will be solved directly, and the world will be much more peaceful. But there is a saying that the capable do more work, and ninjas are the best existence to reflect this value. This world can't lack ninjas who are full of mysticism. Don't try to confuse me. His pupils dilated, and the sight of Manjikyu Sharingan focused on Dustless's abdomen. Kakashi shouted with a murderous aura, "The three of them will not die in vain." Himui. The space in front of Dustless's chest suddenly surged rapidly, like a whirlpool in the deep sea, revealing a majestic devouring power, crazily swallowing everything around. A deep black hole appeared in front of him, constantly forcing Dustless's body to stay on the other side of the black hole forever. The idea is very good, the timing of the control is also very good, but Kakashi always forgot the most important thing. Unfortunately, your dojutsu is too weak, it's not enough to shake me. Calmly staring at Kakashi, Dustless's expression was like a rock, calm and unchanging. His tall and straight body stood so casually without moving, let alone shaking Dustless. It was extremely difficult for him to move his body. This is not the so-called gap in strength. The two sides are not at the same level at all. If the strength is slightly weaker, it can be made up by other factors, but the scene in front of him is clearly a Kage-level powerhouse fighting against an ordinary human who can't refine chakra. How disappointing. Slightly sighing, Dustless said with emotion, "I hope that you could join my camp, but unfortunately, your brain is somewhat inflexible. It seems impossible now. I can only send you into the embrace of God like those three brats before." You are welcome. Finished speaking, Dustless's body turned into thousands of golden rays. With a harsh roar, he directly swept in the direction of Kakashi and disappeared in an instant. As for the black hole made of gravity, it was directly ignored. Gravity can indeed restrain light, but it must be under the condition that both sides are in balance. Dustless's current strength is far beyond the dimension where Kakashi is. This little bit of gravity can't even cause the most basic trouble. So fast. Seeing this scene, Kakashi's nerves tightened, and his eyes subconsciously looked around. This strange godlike speed is completely beyond the perception of human nerves. It is impossible to imagine, let alone predict his movement trajectory. Your reaction is really slow. A disdainful voice suddenly sounded. The one who spoke is Dustless. Seeing that Kakashi didn't react at all, Dustless's eyes flashed with contempt. His thin and weak arm stretched forward, easily choking Kakashi's neck, and lifted Kakashi in the air, expressionlessly pronouncing Kakashi's death sentence. Game over, game over. A strange voice that has never been heard before sounded, also announcing Kakashi's end. Chapter 302. Kakashi, who lost the support of gravity, was shocked and realized that he was already a fish on the chopping board. A fat lamb in the eyes of the big bad wolf Dustless. All of this happened too fast, and when Kakashi realized it, it was already too late. Damn it! With a curse, Kakashi began to struggle, raising the strength of his body to the limit, shaking his body violently, trying to get the thin little hand away from his body. However, what made Kakashi speechless was that this thin arm seemed to have the power of thousands of pounds. No matter how he struggled, even if he turned chakra to attack the thin arm, he couldn't let it go. Dustless was so calm from beginning to end, with a bad smile on his face, looking like he was watching a good show. Kakashi was caught in the air by Dustless, swaying from time to time, and he was particularly weak. Fragile life, as long as I pinch it gently, something interesting will happen, Kakashi. Casually holding Kakashi, Dustless asked with a smile. Fearing that Kakashi didn't understand what he meant, he shrugged his arms. Kakashi's body also rose and fell with the bumps. His lungs were tumbling, making him dizzy. Before I die, I want to ask you a question. Looking gloomily at Dustless's face, Kakashi asked in a hoarse voice. More than 10 years ago, what is the relationship between the two masked men who attacked Konoha and you? After that, Kakashi stared at Dustless. He was sure that even if it had nothing to do with Dustless, Dustless would know who was behind the scenes. Is this kind of question really so attractive to you? Once Sandaime Hokage also asked Dustless the same question, and Kakashi in front of him also asked the same question. The ninjas of Konoha seem to have a curiosity from the soul about this kind of question. You really have a lot to say, but since you asked shamelessly, then I will reluctantly answer you. No way, I am such a kind person. Dustless fiercely disgusted Kakashi and covered himself with a layer of gold. Regardless of Kakashi's ugly face, after pondering for a while he replied. The people who attacked Konoha were me and Uchiha Obito. Impossible. Kakashi's pupils suddenly widened, revealing a look of horror he flatly denied. How could it be Obito? He had already fallen at the Battle of Kanushi Bridge, and he gave me his Sharingan. Fearing that Dustless didn't believe him, Kakashi pointed to his Manjikyu Sharingan. Haven't you found out by now, Kakashi? Maybe this is a wise man's mistake. No matter how smart a person is, there are still some details that they didn't notice. Dustless looked at Kakashi mockingly, or simply looked at his Manjikyu Sharingan and sneered. That kid is not only not dead but now he is very nourished, and his plan is coming to an end. Now the only bijou missing are the Kyubi and the Nibi, or simply the Nibi. The Kyubi's in attribute chakra is in the hands of Obito. As long as the Nibi is collected, the Jubi can be resurrected. That guy is my perfect hero. In order to make him fall into darkness, I spent a lot of effort, and even plotted to kill the little girl Noera Rin, which made him angry enough to activate the Manjikyu Sharingan. The way to activate the Manjikyu Sharingan is extremely harsh, and the only way to activate it is to witness the fall of a close friend, or a close friend in front of your eyes. Therefore, the Uchiha family is called a cursed family. Including the 4th Hokage Namikaze Minato, I killed him. The corners of Wu Chen's mouth curved into a cold arc. Before Kakashi could speak, the arm that was holding his throat suddenly swept out a black ghost fire. The blazing fire made Kakashi's soul frightened. Without the slightest hesitation, Kakashi broke out chakra to resist Dustless. Naive. Perceiving the chakra overflowing from Kakashi's body, Dustless sneered again and again, and in an instant his body seemed to turn into a black hole, and instantly absorbed Kakashi's chakra and turned it into his own. The black fire jumped into Kakashi's body and spread to his whole body, and without even a scream, Kakashi directly disappeared between heaven and earth. As for Kakashi's Manjikyu Sharingan, Dustless directly burned it, and it was completely useless to him now. Looking at Kakashi's disappearance, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of hesitation and confusion. Looking back leisurely, Otsutsuki Haguro, who had accompanied him for decades, was now more than 30 years old. Although he was still young, in the future, he would die with the wind and turn into a wisp of yellow soil. Are you kidding me? How can I allow such a thing to happen? The surging killing intent broke out of his body. Dustless's face was cold, and the surrounding space suddenly dropped to 0 degrees, filled with cold killing intent, and the hoarse and sharp screams of thousands of ghosts could be faintly heard. Otsutsuki Haguro was one of the most important people to Dustless, and he absolutely would not allow such a thing to happen. You seem to be struggling. I thought you were strong, Dustless. A mocking and ridiculing voice suddenly came, and Kabuto came out of the dark forest. His appearance was quite embarrassing, and his body had many wounds and bloodstains. It seems that he used a lot of effort to deal with Haiden and Kakuzu. I just dealt with Kakashi, you actually. He was planning to ridicule Dustless, but unexpectedly, Dustless's eyes were full of cold light, and the monstrous hostility gathered in his eyes made Kabuto's soul frightened. Under that terrifying gaze, Kabuto's body uncontrollably trembled, and even breathing was abnormally difficult. Kabuto never thought that there would be such a terrifying person in the world. Just a gaze, and it made his liver and guts burst. Chapter 303. Big Snake Bag choked with sobs and hurriedly dodged Dustless's piercing gaze. That piercing gaze made him feel as if he had met his natural enemy. It was the first time he felt like someone was holding a guillotine over his head since he learned the celestial technique in the Ryuchi cave. It's not in the same dimension at all. Taking a deep breath, Kabuto's face was particularly depressed until it turned into an ugly green color. Coupled with the scales all over his body, he looked particularly terrifying. Just a simple look from her was enough to make him feel fearful and timid. This shouldn't be something a human could do. Kid, don't be smug. White Zetsu, who came out of the darkness, smiled and looked at Kabuto with a constipated face. He felt particularly happy. There was nothing more comfortable than seeing Kabuto show such an expression. Lord Dustless. White Zetsu didn't dare to be arrogant and said respectfully. Although he didn't know the reason, he had followed Dustless for many years and could tell that Dustless was angry at the moment. If he was killed by the furious Dustless, it would be terrible. Raising his head and glancing at White Zetsu casually, his cold expression gradually converged. Then he closed his eyes indifferently and asked softly, "What's the matter? Is there any news about Nibi's Jinchuriki?" After saying that, Dustless opened his eyes and looked hopefully at White Zetsu with a smile on his face, looking forward to the latter's answer. Baiju's face twitched, and he swallowed the words he was about to say. He looked at Wu Chun and showed a look of fear. He lowered his head silently. It seems that there is no trace. Seeing that White Zetsu was silent, Dustless sighed, and a touch of sadness flashed in his eyes. Needless to say, White Zetsu obviously didn't find any trace of Nibi. Dustless also knew that he couldn't blame White Zetsu for this. Although White Zetsu had countless clones, this world was bigger. If he really wanted to hide a person, Yujito was similar to the Killer Bee-type perfect-tailed beast, and could transform into a tailed beast at will. It definitely couldn't be found in a short time. Useless fellow. Taking a glance at Dustless, the silent Kabuto mercilessly ridiculed him, then turned around and left. He originally wanted to loot Kakashi's corpse, but seeing Dustless go berserk, his interest disappeared. Moreover, there didn't seem to be any corpses on the ground. Perhaps Dustless had used some unknown power to destroy them all. Although it was a bit of a pity, Kabuto was already satisfied. Haiden and Kakuzu's corpses were in his hands. This was his greatest harvest. Even without Kakashi and the others, the corpses weren't perfect, but he was already satisfied. Those two fellows are really ferocious monsters. If I didn't enter the Sage mode and rely on my powerful endurance and the amount of chakra in my body, I'm afraid the last person to be killed would be me. Lifting his hand, Kabuto looked at the bloodstains all over his body and muttered to himself. He could still feel his skin faintly hurting. Those two undying cockroaches were knocked down several times, but they still stubbornly stood up. Kabuto knew that Haiden wasn't ordinary, and couldn't be dealt with ordinary ninjutsu. He just used a strategy to temporarily bury him alive, so that he wouldn't be able to come out in the future. At the same time, he collected a large number of Haiden's samples to prepare for future battles. Kabuto. While he was thinking, a cold voice came from behind him, accompanied by a strong chakra fluctuation. The boundless majestic chakra materialized with Dustless as the center, and the ground under his feet, as well as the plants and animals around him, were all broken into pieces. Looking back, he saw Dustless isolated from the rest of the world. His thin body was obviously close to him, and he could touch him with a wave of his hand, but Kabuto felt like he could only look up at him. As if he was the moon above the ninth heaven, the two of them were not on the same level at all. In Kabuto's heart, he felt an unprecedented sense of inferiority. There are some words that I don't need to say clearly. You should understand that the so-called alliance is actually just words. Once I feel that there is no need to continue the cooperation with you, I will immediately terminate it. Dustless's eyes were calm, and his voice was as calm as the autumn water, without any emotional fluctuations, and the firmness in his voice was indeed something that no one dared to question. Obviously, Dustless was real. Similarly, if one day I feel that the cooperation with you can no longer meet my needs, I will also terminate it. With a meaningful smile on his face, Kabuto stared deeply at Dustless, and said without backing down, "Son of a concubine, you are really arrogant." A dense murderous aura suddenly came like a tide. Dustless sneered and said, "Don't put yourself in the same position as me. You are still too far away. If one day you stand at the same height as me, then it won't be too late to talk nonsense. All right, you can go. Don't look for me in the future if there is nothing. I will send a Zetsu to look for you." Closing his eyes, Dustless directly ordered him to leave, his expression lazy, even showing signs of drowsiness. He didn't put Kabuto in his eyes at all, and was especially contemptuous. "You win." The corner of his eyes flashed fiercely at Dustless, and Kabuto secretly swore in his heart that in the future, he would not rest until he killed Dustless, and he would not rest until he turned Dustless into his experiment subject. Dustless's words were undoubtedly a slap to Kabuto's face, and it was a resounding slap to the face, making Kabuto dizzy, not allowing him to look for him, and whenever there was an order to pass on, the white Zetsu would automatically come to him. This was no different from a cow that could be ordered around. This hatred has no end. I will definitely repay it in the future. As if he wanted to imprint Dustless's appearance into his heart, Kabuto stared at Dustless for a while, and then resolutely turned and left. Chapter 304. Dustless gave the order to leave, and Kabuto was also too lazy to stay here any longer. The killing god in front of him was temperamental, and no one knew what he was thinking in his heart, nor did they know if he was an unreliable ally or a friend. Instead of playing with the danger of walking on a tightrope, it was better to slip away as early as possible and go home to do his experiments. Goodbye. Trying to keep his calm, Kabuto said to Dustless calmly, and regardless of whether Dustless agreed or not, he turned and left. Only Dustless and White Zetsu were left in the dense jungle. Reckless thing. Seeing Kabuto's figure quickly dissipating, Dustless's mouth raised in a contemptuous smile. A small character would always be a small character. This kind of small character was not worth mentioning. In the future, he would either struggle at death's door or be directly erased. Looking at Kabuto's ambitious appearance, it was self-evident what his end would be. Retracting his gaze, Dustless looked at Zetsu with a puzzled look and asked, "What's the matter?" Zetsu's main body personally came to find Dustless, Naturally, something unexpected happened. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to find him. Don't look at how Zetsu strolls around all day. In fact, he is very busy. At the very least, collecting information from all over the place requires his clone and main body to be busy for a while. Hearing this, White Zetsu's face flashed with a touch of depression, and thoughts rolled in his mind. He reorganized his tone and said solemnly, "Uchiha Sasuke, I don't know where he got the news, but he seems to have found the organization's base. Now in the direction of the Rain Village, there are 3 other people, who seem to be his companions." After that, White Zetsu felt incredible, and his face was full of disbelief. The Akatsuki's base was in the Rain Village, and the specific people who knew about it were limited to the members of the organization. Is there a traitor? White Zetsu's eyes flashed with light, and he was surprised. Sasuke naturally knew the Akatsuki's base. Wuchen was deep in thought. After a while he shook his head. You think too highly of Sasuke. The Akatsuki organization is full of S-class rebellious ninjas. They are all proud and arrogant people. It's impossible for them to conspire with that kid. Now that the members of the organization are almost dead, it's impossible to have a mole. Dustless knew Sasuke's temperament too well. Even if the strong members of the Akatsuki organization lowered themselves to cooperate with him, Sasuke would absolutely refuse them without mercy. And even killing them was not impossible. There was no other reason, because Sasuke's 2 brothers were members of this organization. The other members naturally loved him and received special treatment from him. So it was natural for them to be killed. It should be information from Orochimaru. Dustless's eyes flashed with light. Orochimaru was once a member of the Akatsuki organization, so he naturally knew where the Akatsuki organization was. In addition, Orochimaru was half of Sasuke's sense-like existence, and Orochimaru hated Dustless and Itachi very much. He took advantage of Sasuke's revenge to take the opportunity to eradicate Dustless and Itachi. This is indeed very likely. White Zetsu nodded. Although Orochimaru was dead, it was not impossible for him to tell Sasuke all the information about the Akatsuki organization. White Zetsu, isn't this a very interesting thing? If I didn't guess wrong, that kid's first goal should be Itachi. Brothers killing each other. This is a wonderful show that can't be missed. The corners of Wu Chen's mouth curled into a mischievous smile as he asked with interest. The corner of Baiju's mouth twitched. He was speechless. Only Wu Chen was interested in this kind of thing. He smiled as he watched his 2 younger brothers fight fiercely. Only Wu Chen had such a refined interest. It's time to leave. Looking around, Dustless said indifferently. Kakashi and the members of Team 10, who were killed by him before, didn't even leave their bones behind. It can be said that it was extremely clean. Looking at the void in front of him indifferently, Wu Chen took a deep breath. With his appearance, the so-called plot had completely disappeared. Now all the unscientific things that happened were extremely scientific. In the Rain Village, it was always cloudy all year round. The weather was gloomy, and there was rarely a clear sky. Almost every day, there was a dense cloud that gathered and didn't disperse. The dark clouds were endless, and they were thick and connected with each other. A ray of sunlight couldn't find the Rain Village. The dark depths of the ground were accompanied by coldness and depression all year round. Looking up, the tall giant was clearly visible. Its uneven blue veins were particularly ferocious, and its 9 eye-catching big eyes were even more chilling. The giant was dozens of meters tall, and its body was surrounded by ancient vicissitudes of life. Naturally, it was undoubtedly the Geto Mazo. On the fingers of the Geto Mazo, there were several figures, all wearing black trench coats embroidered with red clouds. The only difference was that compared to the past, this gathering was much more deserted. I really didn't expect that the zombie duo would be killed. I used to think that Haiden was the strongest monster in the world. A frivolous and playful voice came from the big mouth of Kisame. Although the tone sounded indifferent, anyone could hear the hidden emotion. The enemy is not simple. Indeed, the enemy this time is not simple. It's Dustless and Itachi's younger brother. Uchiha Sasuke. I heard that he was taken away by Orochimaru as an experimental subject a few years ago. Now that he came out alive, it means that Orochimaru is dead. Pain's eyes flashed with a burning brilliance. He didn't expect that this teenager named Sasuke was so fierce that he could defeat Orochimaru, one of the legendary Sannin. Chapter 305. On the empty stone statue, several figures were clearly visible. Due to Dustless's interference, the members of the Akatsuki organization were sharply reduced. At this time, there were only Hoodlum, Masked Man, and Deidara, Hoshigaki and Itachi, as well as Dustless and Konan. Of course, the Silent Pain was also included. Bring Sasuke into the organization. The calm voice broke the stifling scene. Pain, who was sitting on the head of the Geto statue, stood up and opened his eyes. The black lines in the eye of Samsara surged with ripples. Of course, if he doesn't want to join the organization, get rid of him. Rinnegan released a cold murderous aura. Pain said in a cold tone. His eyes fell on Hoshigaki and Itachi. When he was about to instruct them to tame Sasuke, a disdainful voice with a little anger sounded first. Orochimaru should be my prey. That kid actually killed my prey without permission. Who gave him the right? A voice that was filled with coldness and hatred spread out. It spread throughout the entire cave like floodwaters. Everyone frowned when they heard this. They were stunned as they looked at the black figure that was burning with anger. There was no doubt that it was Deidara. This kid is really vengeful, but it's good. I'll use you to test Sasuke's strength. With a smile at the corner of his mouth, Dustless cast a pitiful look at Deidara. This kid is hopeless. But whether it's him, Itachi, or Sasuke, Deidara was defeated by the three brothers. It's really tragic. Dustless once defeated Deidara, and Itachi was the same. As for this time, Deidara seemed to have a great chance of winning. If Dustless remembered correctly, Deidara was still nursing a grievance. His short life, under the dark clouds of Uchiha's Sharingan, is really sad. It's a pity that you, the hunter, became the prey in the end. With a relieved smile, Wuchen looked at Deidara with pity. After a while, he immediately put on a look of indifference. He closed his eyes and looked relaxed. The corners of his mouth were gently raised, hanging a smile that made people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. It has to be said that in the dark, Akatsuki organization, Dustless is a beautiful scenery. Then let Damura and Tobi win over Sasuke. If he is willing to join, then that's it. If he doesn't want to, then get rid of that annoying kid. Pain frowned slightly then nodded. This kind of thing can be given to anyone. Sasuke agreed to join the Akatsuki naturally. Everyone was happy. Otherwise, he could only be killed. Regardless of everyone's reaction, Pain's body lost its texture and disappeared into the dark night sky, leaving only his calm voice in the air. At least find a place to mourn for Kaku and Haiden. Who are you kidding? Dustless smirked secretly, and his face was full of disdain. He didn't believe that Uzumaki Nagata would mourn for Haiden and Kakuzu. He didn't have the leisure nor the elegance. Only Dustless and a few other people were left in the empty cave. The atmosphere instantly turned solemn. Ghost Mermaid came out to entertain the atmosphere. His words instantly made Deidara furious. The collision of art and Sharingan. It seems that Sharingan wins every time. Shamelessly pulling out a ferocious smile, Ghost Shark half-jokingly half-seriously teased, looking at Deidara's eyes full of ridicule, indifferently adding fuel to the fire. That Sharingan kid will soon understand the greatness of instant art. After seeing my art, that kid's soul will be sublimated. Looking at Hoshigaki scornfully, Tita sneered disdainfully. In his heart, he despised the Uchiha family. The Uchiha family was nothing but a family living in the Kekkai Genkai. After getting rid of this halo, the Uchiha family was just a small family not worth mentioning. Including Dustless and Itachi. Let's go, Ghost Shark. Raising his eyelids, he glanced at Deidara faintly, and the corner of his eyes passed over Dustless without leaving a trace. Itachi's body began to collapse and fade, disappearing from everyone's sight. Seeing Itachi's body fade, Ghost Shark also began to disappear. Deidara-san. Nondescript laughter rang out, accompanied by a burst of strange dancing. Seeing this scene, Wuchen also smiled in response. In the Akatsuki organization, only Hoodlum called people like this. You guys talk, communicate well, otherwise maybe there will be no more days in the future. Dustless saw this and smiled mysteriously, with a different meaning in his tone. His body faded like Itachi and Ghost Shark, and soon lost its texture. Conan beside him also did the same. Hoodlum frowned, and a strange color flashed in his eyes. He always felt that Dustless meant something, as if he was sure that they would be separated from Deidara. This is life. In the bedroom filled with lights, Dustless leisurely tasted fragrant tea, and in his arms was Yuluo, whose face was flushed. Dustless laughed from time to time. Obviously, the two of them had experienced the most primitive power activities of human beings before. I heard that your third brother has come to the Rain Village. Her ruddy face gradually converged, and Yuluo whispered softly, "You three brothers are really freaks, all of you are very strong." Not to mention Dustless and Itachi, even the weakest Sasuke's strength is advancing by leaps and bounds, and it won't be difficult to surpass Itachi in the future. They are just marionettes, even if they have great achievements in the future. It's just a passing cloud. The essence of a chess piece has never changed. Pinching the cute little dimples on Yuluo's face, Wu Chen's expression was calm and tranquil as he said in an unconcerned manner, "That kid's talent is outstanding, but don't forget who is the one who guided his life. In the end, whether it is Uchiha Itachi or Uchiha Sasuke, they are all chess pieces used by Dustless. How great their future achievements are depends not on their struggle, but on how strong Dustless, the mastermind behind the scenes, wants them to become. Even Uchiha Itachi's Manjikyu Sharingan was led by Dustless." Chapter 306. The way to open Mangekyo is to witness the death of relatives and friends, and Itachi's way of opening Mangekyo is no exception. Naturally, after witnessing Shirsue's death, unprecedented grief emerged in his mind. The special chakra will stimulate his eyes, and then open the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. And the initiator is Dustless. It was he who controlled the puppet Uchiha Kagami to kill Shirsue in front of Uchiha Itachi, which made him open Mangekyo Sharingan. You're really cunning. You even schemed against your own brother. Yuluo glared at Dustless angrily and patted away the hand in her arms. I'm afraid he's the only one in the world who schemed against his own brother. So what? Dustless curled his lips and took back his hand rather unhappily. He stretched his body and said fiercely, "A man with a small amount of strength doesn't have to be ruthless. The ancient heroes all stepped on corpses. My methods are much gentler now." Dustless doesn't think he's so ruthless. In this dirty world, there are too many things like killing one's parents. There's not much market for human morality. Moreover, Dustless doesn't think it's too much to scheme against Uchiha Sasuke and Uchiha Itachi. Dustless asked himself and Sasuke, this kid, and Uchiha Fugaku couple also died in Itachi's hands. Who would have thought that Sasuke met him with a desperate look? His ferocious appearance was worse than the enemy who killed his father. Don't talk about those two boys. Don't you want to revive the Otsutsuki family? Come on, let's continue the previous after-dinner activities. Rain Village is rich in steel, and the buildings are made of steel. It's a very unique village in the ninja world. Especially this village was the battlefield of several major powers during World War II. A few years after World War II, the village also implemented a closed policy, and the situation in the village was unknown. Because of the existence of the demigod, no one dared to have ideas about the Rain Village. A few years ago, the so-called demigod had already died. Facing the 6 paths of pain controlled by Uzumaki Nagato, the demigod naturally fell in front of the gods. Little Nan. In the dark steel tunnel, Dustless and Xiaonan walked side by side. After several years of getting along, their relationship had improved greatly. Compared to the time when they were filled with the smell of gunpowder, the current relationship between Xiaonan and Dustless was much more tranquil and relaxed. In particular, Conan and Otsutsuki Dustless were good friends who could talk about anything. Unknowingly, Dustless and Conan became closer. Do you have any questions, Dustless? Xiaonan tilted her head and looked at Dustless suspiciously. Her cold voice sounded more lively and light. Her sparkling eyes were very lively, sparkling and translucent like clear gems, perfect and flawless. Even Dustless couldn't help but be dazed by such a beauty. What's the matter with Nagato? Now he seems to be looking for other people. Where would he find time to find me? Turning his head very unnaturally, Dustless took a deep breath and asked calmly. Akatsuki's members were already scarce, and now Sasori of the Red Sand, Haiden, and Engel died one after another. The already stretched manpower was even more scarce. Nagato was now looking for new members. Where would he find time to find him? I don't know the specifics of this situation. I'm just responsible for passing the message. Conan replied truthfully. Why did Uzumaki Nagato suddenly look for Dustless this time? She didn't know the specifics. In countless missions, this was the first time Nagato didn't tell Conan anything. This is interesting. His eyes flashed with a strange color. Wu Chen's pace couldn't help but speed up. His face was full of expectation. He was curious about what Nagato was looking for him for. And even his confidant Conan didn't know the specific content. In the dark tunnel, two figures quickly shuttled through and entered a more open world ahead. Looking up, the dark environment was no different to the daytime for Dustless. He could easily see the stooped red-haired man in front of him with a black iron rod. In the whole world, there was only one person dressed like this, Uzumaki Nagato. He's really suffering in this state. Sighing silently, Dustless walked straight towards Uzumaki Nagato. He could clearly feel that Uzumaki Nagato's vitality was being eroded and occupied by the black iron rod. Forcibly using the power of Rinnegan was like this. If chakra wasn't enough, it would exhaust his vitality. The reason why Uzumaki Nagato could now linger on was entirely due to the huge vitality in his body and chakra. Otherwise, he would have died many years ago. Conan, I have something to say to Dustless, you go out first. Raising his eyes, revealing mysterious purple eyes, Uzumaki Nagato said in a hoarse voice. His old voice gave people a feeling of dying. However, if one were to pay attention, they would be able to tell that although this voice was hoarse in its twilight years, it was full of vigor and vitality. Conan was stunned at first, looking at Nagato puzzledly, but she still nodded obediently. Her eyes then stared at Dustless fiercely, indicating that he shouldn't go too far. Otherwise, she wouldn't let him go. Dustless could only smile bitterly, sighing that this little girl was really unreasonable. If he really wanted to do something bad to Uzumaki Nagato, he could have done it a long time ago. There was no need to wait until now. Conan couldn't disobey Nagato's order, so she turned and left. In the empty dark environment, for a while, only Dustless and Uzumaki Nagato were left. No one spoke, and the atmosphere was unusually depressing. I entrust Conan to you. I hope you can protect her for the rest of her life. Just as Dustless was thinking about what his purpose was, Uzumaki Nagato suddenly said something surprising. Chapter 307. Dustless didn't think about Nagato's purpose, but he didn't expect it to be such a romantic thing. Especially when two men were talking about this kind of thing, Dustless felt particularly weird, and even uncomfortable. His body unconsciously had goosebumps, and after a long time, Dustless finally calmed down. Staring at Uzumaki Nagato's dry and pale face, Dustless frowned slightly. He could hear the sincerity in Nagato's tone, absolutely without any false elements, and even a little bit of pleading. As a reward, I can give you the Rinnegan after I die. The Rinnegan rippled, and the black lines slowly spread out. Uzumaki Nagato was determined, and he looked at Dustless's eyes without any falsehood. That firm tone made Dustless stunned. Observing Uzumaki Nagato carefully, Wuchen's eyes flashed with a hint of realization. This guy used to use the Geto Mazo, and the vitality in his body was almost exhausted. Especially those black iron rods behind him were still devouring his vitality. If it wasn't for the huge vitality of the Uzumaki clan, perhaps he would have already died. Conan was Nagato's most important relative. Although Dustless wasn't the most suitable person to entrust her to, he was definitely the most reliable. With his unfathomable strength, Dustless could naturally ensure Conan's safety. This is not a problem, I will accept the Rinnegan. Solemnly nodding, Dustless said that there was no problem. Even if Nagato didn't say it, he would never let anything happen to Conan. In his previous life, Dustless was quite fond of Conan, and over the years, he had worked with her a lot, and they had established a deep affection and so-called bond. Moreover, Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Conan had a good relationship. For whatever reason, Dustless couldn't leave Conan alone. As for the Rinnegan, it doesn't matter whether you have it or not. Only the owner of those eyes, Uchiha Madara, can exert the power of the Rinnegan to the limit. In the final analysis, the Rinnegan belonged to Madara. Even if others used it, they couldn't exert its full power, not to mention that Dustless already had the Rinnegan and the Tenseigan. That's the best. Hearing this, Uzumaki Nagato breathed a sigh of relief, and a smile swept across the corner of his mouth. The stone pressing on his chest disappeared, and his breathing was extraordinarily relaxed. If he exchanged the Rinnegan for Conan's piece, Nagato felt that it was worth it. The Rinnegan had a price, and Conan's life was priceless. It seems that his body is not far from collapse. Shaking his head, Dustless's eyes flashed with pity. Uzumaki Nagato was completely exhausted by the Rinnegan. The burden of the Rinnegan was as heavy as Mount Tai. Uzumaki Nagato wasn't the owner of the Rinnegan, and it was naturally more exhausting to use it. Although the chakra in his body was huge, using the Rinnegan required more majestic chakra. Some ordinary jutsu were good, and it didn't involve vitality, but large-scale attacks or seals directly required vitality. You've seen it, Dustless. It's really as you imagined. I really don't have many years to live like this. I have to arrange a good future for Conan. Nagato smiled and didn't hide it, because the Rinnegan was like this. It was a double-edged sword. His body had been hollowed out, and he could still survive without using the power of the Rinnegan. The consequences of forcibly using the power of the Rinnegan were self-evident. Dustless nodded. He didn't need to look deeper. Just looking at the surface, he could guess from Nagato's thin body that his vitality was constantly being consumed, and the vitality that was devoured would never be recovered. With the passage of time, it would only become more and more fragile, and the overdraft of vitality would become more and more serious. Dark clouds rolled in the sky, and thunderclouds gathered. The dark haze covered the sky and the earth was shrouded in this gloom, revealing endless depression and ominous. The inside of the rolling dark clouds seemed to be brewing something, and it was constantly expanding, which was particularly terrifying. On the withered grass on the ground, four figures in robes walked against the wind. The whistling wind made their robes bulging, making it difficult for them to move. It was Sasuke and his snake squad, later called Eagle Squad, which was renamed after learning Itachi's true intention. Damned heavens! Suigetsu, who couldn't stand the bad weather, took the lead and screamed at the sky, venting his inner dissatisfaction and anger. It's still a while before we reach the rain village. The young man with orange hair suddenly spoke. This person was Yugo. There were several birds in his hand, and they screamed at him. The sharp sound kept ringing, and Yugo seemed to understand, sometimes frowning and sometimes nodding. Useless thing, a big man is so useless. Just reincarnate as a woman in the next life. Sasuke is still reliable. The red-haired girl with glasses looked at the indignant Suigetsu disdainfully, and then her eyes shone with a wolf-like light, and there was even some saliva at the corner of her mouth. She looked at Uchiha Sasuke with a smirk, apparently falling into endless fantasy. Her eyes even turned into the shape of a peach heart. Sasuke's partners are not bad. It seems that everyone is extraordinary. The red-haired girl seems to be from the Uzumaki clan. White Zetsu's clone was hiding in the dense jungle, and was surprised. Especially Yugo and Uzumaki Karen, who particularly attracted his attention. These two people's abilities were obviously good, including Suigetsu, who was shouting at God. Although he didn't see any specialty, he must be good. Sasuke wouldn't choose someone who would drag him down as a teammate. After a moment of contemplation, White Zetsu's clone went deep into the ground and disappeared. Naturally, he went to report Sasuke's information to Deidara and Hoodlum. Chapter 308. The cold wind whistled, and the boundless sky was covered with dark clouds. The clear white bird in the sky was particularly conspicuous. Two black figures peered at the ground below, sometimes showing a puzzled look. Looking closely, it was Hoodlum and Deidara. White Zetsu, that bastard. Can't the geographical coordinates be more accurate and detailed? After looking down at the ground below without any human eyes, Deidara was angry. With such a strong wind in the sky, he couldn't control the giant clay bird under his feet. No matter when, humans are restrained by natural factors, and ninjas are no exception. Hoodlum behind him was grinning. Although his expression couldn't be recognized because of the spiral mask, it was not difficult to see from his dancing movements that he was very happy. It's really strange. Frowning, Deidara said to himself doubtfully. Although he complained about White Zetsu, his information would not be wrong. Even if there was a slight deviation, it wouldn't be wrong. Now there was no one in the surrounding 10 kilometers of the ground. Not to mention humans, there were no beasts such as insects. Deidara inevitably had doubts in his heart. Senpai Deidara. Frowning tightly, while burying his head in thought, Hoodlum's frivolous voice suddenly sounded. Deidara, who was already in a bad mood, stared at Hoodlum unkindly. Just as he was about to scold him for talking nonsense, a loud muffled thunder resounded through the sky. Boom boom boom. The space that was as dark as night suddenly shone brightly. In an instant it was sublimated. The brilliance that shone like the sun shone through the void. Within the range of the brilliance, everything in the world seemed to be exterminated. They groaned unbearably. Gulp. Looking up at the countless thick silver irregular beams of light, Deidara's eyes were filled with fear, and he subconsciously took a step back. Deidara is of the earth attribute, and this divine thunder in the sky is the anger of God. It has the absolute power to destroy the world, and it just restrains him. Thunder attribute restrains earth attribute. Senpai Deidara, this situation doesn't seem right. Hoodlum calmed down this time. The single eye on the mask cautiously looked at the surrounding environment. After a long silence, Hoodlum took a deep breath. The surrounding environment was too strange. It was like a giant electromagnetic field, crackling nonstop, attracting the thunder and lightning in the sky to gather. Thick silver thunder and lightning rolled in the dark clouds. It was like a natural minefield. Something is indeed off. This kind of supernatural imagination doesn't make sense. Deidara's panic quickly disappeared and he agreed. The rain village was rainy all year round and thunder and lightning were common, but there was never such a terrible scene. It was as if someone had deliberately created an electromagnetic field. We've been tricked. He suddenly recalled the party a few months ago, during which Dustless reported on Sasuke's abilities, including his ability to control lightning. Boom boom boom. As if to verify Dedale's thoughts, countless lightning gathered in an instant, and turned into a sharp silver spear that was tens of meters long. The silver body was straight and sharp, and the tip of the spear revealed a sharpness that could penetrate everything. This was just the beginning. The silver spear hungrily absorbed the natural thunder and lightning from all sides, quickly strengthening itself and extending its body endlessly. We've been ambushed. How did that kid know the whereabouts of Deidara and Hoodlum? In the green forest, Dustless and Zetsu stood side by side, staring at the silver light in the depths of the void. Both of them were stunned. They didn't need to think about it to know that the person behind it was naturally Sasuke, who controlled thunder and lightning. That kid has become a lot smarter, and he knows how to find another way. Dustless, who returned to his senses, smiled. Although Sasuke was a bit arrogant, he was indeed a talented existence who knew how to use the power of nature to make up for his lack of strength. It seems that the kid got a lot of experience from fighting with me. Is this a case of shooting himself in the foot? Wu Chen's expression was calm as he muttered to himself with a smile. Zetsu just turned his head slightly and glanced at Dustless. He didn't hear any regret from Dustless's tone, but showed an expectant look. What means did this kid use to set up the ambush? Is it possible that he is the reincarnation of God and knew when Dedale would attack him? Staring at the void where countless thunder and lightning gathered in the distance, White Zetsu said incredulously. Sasuke obviously ambushed in advance and set a trap for Dedale, the fat sheep, to get in. When your clone detected him, I'm afraid it was already exposed. Sasuke deliberately pretended not to know anything. In fact, he was secretly aware of your existence, so he could set a trap in advance. Black Zetsu's eyes flashed with understanding. The minefield in front of him must have been prepared in advance, which means that Sasuke had discovered White Zetsu's clone in advance, so he could set a trap. Impossible. What means does he have to detect my clone? This joke is not funny at all. You have no funny genes, Black Zetsu. White Zetsu was like a cat whose tail was stepped on. He immediately denied Black Zetsu's guess. At that time, his clone was hundreds of meters away from Sasuke. What means could that kid have to detect him? This was simply impossible. It's impossible for Sasuke, but his teammates are extraordinary. The red-haired girl who controls the Uzumaki clan's secret jutsu has a detection ability that is far beyond the current Sasuke. Dustless explained softly, but he agreed with Black Zetsu's statement. The current Sasuke does not have such a powerful detection ability, but the detection ability of Uzumaki Karen is very good. Kagura's mind's eye covers an area with a radius of tens of kilometers. Therefore, Sasuke's snake team can wait at ease, detect the existence of Deadale and Hoodlum in advance, and create this boundless thundercloud. Chapter 309. The dazzling lightning gathered and condensed, and the spear floating in the void was like a baby, constantly swallowing the lightning around to strengthen itself. The spear in front of me is obviously more powerful than the Kirin from last time. Speechlessly shaking his head, Wuxia couldn't help but envy Itachi and Erjuzi. These two brothers were very talented, but his big brother was terrible. If it wasn't for the system, which was outside the law, he might have died as cannon fodder in World War III. Not good. That should be beyond the scope of S-class ninjutsu. Deidara and Hoodlum must have been killed. Black Zetsu was quite worried. The masked man Hoodlum's ability to turn into nothingness can naturally guarantee his safety, but Deidara doesn't have this ability to be immune to physical attacks. Boom. Silver light fell from the sky, like an angry god's full blow. The destructive force shuttled through Deidara and Hoodlum, who were suspended in the void, and violently pressed them to the ground. Boom, boom, boom. Sand and dust filled the sky, mud splashed everywhere, and the previously intact land was devastated, and an unprecedented deep pit appeared as if it was hit by a meteorite. The ground within a radius of a few kilometers trembled violently. Everything was sealed. The central area was even more unsightly. Glaring cracks spread out like a spider web, swallowing up the surrounding ground beyond recognition. Some of the cracks were even several kilometers long. He couldn't have been killed, could he? White Zetsu's eyes widened as he looked at the ground around him that was destroyed and swallowed. Such a large range of ninjutsu had the power to penetrate everything. Not to mention being hit by it, even if it was contaminated by it. It would be instantly eroded and turned into smoke that dissipated with the wind and completely dissipated. It shouldn't be. Looking at the giant pit in the distance, Dustless shook his head. He was an S-class ninja. Being killed by one blow, even if it was a sneak attack, it can't be justified. At the same time, Sasuke and his snake team also appeared. They're still breathing. These two guys are really thick. Uzumaki Karen looked at the charred figure in the deep pit in astonishment. Her eyes widened, filled with disbelief. Not only did he not die from such a powerful attack, his skin was only slightly charred. How could she not be surprised? They should have escaped Sasuke's attack. Jiwoo calmly analyzed, his tone carrying a hint of astonishment. Clearly, he was also very curious as to how Deadale and Hoodlum were able to dodge. On the other hand, Sasuke maintained an indifferent expression from the beginning to the end. His cold expression was aloof and arrogant. Although he was puzzled, he was silent from the beginning and didn't say a word. Karen, who was about to strike up a conversation with him, was speechless and tangled. She secretly scolded Sasuke for being stupid and not knowing how to flirt. What a powerful spell. Fortunately, God's might made me and Deadale illusory, otherwise. The masked man's eyes flashed with lingering fear. At the critical moment, he used his dojutsu to absorb Deadale into a different space. If they were hit head-on, even if they barely survived, they would lose a layer of skin. Even so, their bodies were seriously burned by the scattered lightning. However, this kind of injury was a trivial matter for ninjas, especially Deadale, who was the strongest rebellious ninja. Hoodlum, thank you. However, due to the stinging pain caused by the burn, Deadale gritted his teeth and stood up, solemnly thanking Hoodlum. If it weren't for Hoodlum, he might have died on the spot. Dedale-senpai, what are you talking about? I just did what I could. Hearing this, the masked man hoodlum danced again and smiled embarrassedly. But you're really a hidden guy. You actually mastered such a brilliant space-time ninjutsu. After taking a deep look at Hoodlum, Dedale retracted his gaze. He was too lazy to ask more. Everyone has their own secrets. At the moment, he just looked at Sasuke and his teammates. You have guts, but you're quite fat. Dedale was so angry that he laughed. To be honest, he hated and even hated Uchiha. Because of Dustless and Itachi, he suffered a lot. Now because of Sasuke's sneak attack, he was embarrassed. He hated the Uchiha family even more. Fools who live in Kekkei Genkai will never understand the greatness of art. Turning a deaf ear to the burning pain all over his body, Dedale's murderous intent was awe-inspiring. His eyes widened and he said fiercely, "To deal with you three brothers, I'll start with you, the youngest fledgling." Hearing this, Sasuke's expression turned cold, and his fists turned white. Dedale mocked him as the weakest fledgling. Even if this was the case, he couldn't accept it. With only 3 Tomo Sharingan, he was indeed much worse than Itachi and Dustless. White mucus overflowed from Dedale's palm like running water, and immediately turned into a giant dragon with a bang, and flew straight into the depths of the void. Ah, that kid probably really angered Dedale. Now there's a good show to watch. Looking up at Dedale, who was floating in the sky, White Zetsu gloated. Sasuke's previous attack completely enraged Dedale, a furious lion. There's no need to watch anymore. Dedale will definitely lose. Staring at Dedale, who was soaring in the sky, Dustless shook his head. If you want to destroy him, you must first make him crazy. This is the truth that has never changed. Dedale originally hated the Uchiha family very much. Now that Sasuke's sneak attack was successful, the anger in his heart naturally accumulated to the extent that it must erupt. Someone must become the target of his venting. What a pity. Looking up at the sky and sighing, Dustless turned around and left. Troubled times had arrived. Those who couldn't escape would be eliminated. Karma was reincarnated. No one could escape its curse. Dedale's death is not accidental but inevitable. The next part of the script is probably about killing each other. With a cold smile on the corner of his mouth, Dustless's wanton smile lingered in the sky for a long time. Chapter 310. Just as Dustless turned and left, a figure that looked very similar to Dustless appeared behind him like a ghost. Wearing a black trench coat embroidered with red clouds, with a clear 8 mark on his face, there was no doubt that it was Uchiha Itachi. It turned out to be Itachi. You'll scare people to death if you appear like a ghost. Seeing Itachi's sudden appearance, Dustless pretended to be surprised, and then looked at Itachi with a smile. From his calm tone, it was not difficult to hear that Dustless had already noticed his existence. Obviously, he deliberately teased Itachi like this. You already knew, didn't you? Staring at Dustless faintly, Itachi's performance was plain, and his eyes remained unchanged. He didn't believe that Dustless didn't notice his existence. It doesn't matter, look at you like this. Squinting his eyes and carefully looking at Itachi, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of complexity and whispered, "Is that kid really worth it for you to pay so much?" Dustless sighed. Itachi's life has already entered the end, and it won't be long before the light of extinction flashes. In this life, I don't ask about the past, I don't ask for the afterlife, I just ask for a clear conscience. Looking at Dustless's eyes, Itachi replied softly. His tone was full of unprecedented determination. He will use his last remaining strength to light the light of hope for Sasuke. Itachi's face was full of determination, his body exuded a majestic momentum, and his eyes were particularly firm. The road was his own choice, and he never regretted it. Dustless just stared at Itachi's face faintly, and for a while, he was also unusually melancholy. Sasuke's achievements can be said to be exchanged by stepping on Itachi's body. You and I are different. Just when Dustless was about to persuade Itachi to think twice, his indifferent, philosophical voice sounded first, and the content was that Dustless was also stunned. Perhaps you think that I'm very foolish. In fact, sometimes I think so too. Itachi's deep eyes were replaced by a blank look as he said in a daze, I've been living in fear like a puppet my whole life. Every day feels like a year. Sometimes I really feel that it's better to die. Because you've been living in the script designed by Dustless. Black Zetsu and White Zetsu were laughing. They understood Itachi's feelings. Living like a puppet without emotions was worse than being dead. It was worse than being dead. But I saw hope from the little devil named Uzumaki Naruto. As he said, where the leaves fly, the fire will illuminate the village, and the leaves will sprout again. Itachi said. It was from Naruto's perseverance that he saw how a single spark could start a prairie fire. Even the weakest flame could light up the world, therefore. Itachi decided to use his own life to ignite the bright spark, so that Sasuke's light shines all over the world. Are you really so naive now, Itachi? Be honest, communication between people doesn't exist at all. Seeing that Itachi was still so naive, Dustless sneered and said, Perhaps you'll think that this is my personal extreme view. Of course, it's actually my own idea. But thousands of years have shown that people can't communicate without gaps. Itachi just listened quietly without saying anything. Dustless glanced at him and continued. Indeed, as you said, the will of fire might exist, but it also left behind sins because of it. Where the leaves fly, the flames will burn, and the fire will shine again, illuminating people's hearts. But it's precisely because of this that the seeds of hatred are left, because the flames that illuminate others are stepping on the corpses of others. Dustless sneered and sneered at the so-called will of fire. Every time a hero is born, it means that someone died. Take Uzumaki Naruto, for example. After the battle with Uzumaki Nagato, he became the hero of Konoha. However, all of this was built by stepping on Uzumaki Nagato's corpse. It was precisely because of Uzumaki Nagato's tragedy that Naruto's name as a hero was born. Instead of saying that the will of fire is a beacon in the darkness, I think it's the beginning of karma. Everything is born because of karma, and it's also destroyed because of karma. The beginning of the bond means the curse of karma. You still believe in such a stupid joke. I've been wrong about you for so many years, Itachi. Dustless scolded coldly. To be honest, he didn't expect such a result. Living in a dark organization like the Akatsuki for several years, Itachi still had such a naive idea. You have a glib tongue, but your heart has been eroded by darkness. Things like human nature and morality don't exist at all. Ignoring Dustless's crazy words, Itachi also retorted. Although Dustless's words made him speechless, he didn't think that Dustless was right. Human nature and morality? What a joke, a person who killed his parents, saying that I have no human nature and morality. Don't you think your words and actions are too ridiculous, Itachi? Why do I always have a ridiculous feeling that you haven't grown up? Is it an illusion? Dustless sneered. Although he was ruthless, he didn't kill his parents. And he secretly used Geto, reincarnation, to resurrect Uchiha Mikoto and Uchiha Fugaku. Wuxia also boasted that he had a clear conscience after reaching such a realm. In the final analysis, in this world of ninjas, human emotions were thin and sparse. People like Itachi, who took photos of his younger brother everywhere, were indeed an abnormal existence. This world is illusory. I will do justice for the heavens, pull thousands of living beings into the world of infinite dreams, and let them live in the world of fantasy. Isn't it beautiful? Chapter 311. Itachi frowned slightly. At this moment, Dustless's face was indifferent, giving people a feeling that was particularly strange. He was indifferent, as if he was an invader from a different world. His existence was to trample on this decaying world and establish a new order. His pupils narrowed, and Itachi's eyes were bright and wise. He tried to spy on Dustless again. However, the scene that came into his eyes made him sluggish. The space began to shift strangely, pulling him into an unknown world. In the depths of the dark universe, there were countless planets of different colors. Each planet was surrounded by a strong gravitational force. If one looked at any one of them, he would be swallowed and lose his mind. Dustless was the planet with the strongest gravitational force. Itachi's reason was trapped in it in the blink of an eye, and he could not extricate himself. Forget it, I'm nosy enough. With a self-deprecating smile, Dustless said with relief, maybe you are right. Everyone has their own way, and others have no right to interfere and criticize. With a sigh, Dustless found that he was nosy. He didn't expect to talk so much in a moment. Whether Itachi died or not had nothing to do with him. Anyway, he was just a chess piece. The blank look turned into clarity. Dustless looked cold and walked straight forward, passing by Itachi's side like a breeze. I hope you don't regret it. They are alive and well, and you don't have to blame yourself. The brief and plain 6 words resounded through the void. Although the words were short, Itachi's heart stirred up huge ripples. Over the years, the same scene invaded his dream every day, torturing him. Stop, I didn't say you could go. Turning his head, Itachi's face was slightly cold. He stared at Dustless's back and released his killing intent. He said coldly, as the price for listening to your long speech, you must answer my question. Dustless gave Itachi too many doubts. He did not expect anything else, only that Dustless could answer his questions truthfully. Oh, don't release such an oppressive killing intent. I thought you wanted to challenge me. Dustless turned his head and said with a smile. His tone was full of ridicule, and his expression was calm. He asked without a trace, of course, no matter what. I am your brother, and I still have feelings for you. Tell me if you have any questions, just ask. Itachi's frowned brows loosened, his throat twitched, and before he spoke, his lips trembled slightly, and he asked in a hoarse voice, the people you mentioned before. Of course it's our parents. Dustless waved his hand and interrupted Itachi's question impatiently. He said bluntly, they are living in seclusion safe and sound. You don't have to bear a grudge. They are all living well and healthy. After saying that, Dustless didn't wait for Itachi to respond and left. Itachi was stunned as he stared at the departing figure. That's good. After exhaling heavily, Itachi was too lazy to ask more nonsense. The rock pressing on his chest disappeared, and his whole body and mind suddenly became very light, like a white cloud walking in the clouds. Itachi's respect for Uchiha Fugaku and his wife was beyond doubt. If it wasn't for the situation, he didn't want to kill his beloved parents. After that, the whole person has been living in the shadow of killing his father and mother. He was physically and mentally tired. Now suddenly, the rain and fog were lifted, and the whole person was cheerful. No matter what means, as long as his parents were safe and sound, the rest was not important, and living in seclusion away from the world was also the best ending. The heavy moral shackles were completely loosened, and the whole person was floating, and his spirit was 100 times better. Even the physical burden caused by the terminal illness disappeared in an instant. Vulgar. Turning his head, the corner of his eyes swept over Itachi's body. Dustless disdainfully snorted, and then simply turned and left. As for Itachi's next move, he was too lazy to ask. His feet were on his own legs, and Dustless had no right to interfere. He simply flashed away and left. Out of sight, out of mind. Dustless was too lazy to talk about the grievances between Sasuke and Itachi. No matter what the outcome of their final victory or defeat, it won't change anything. They will still be used by him. Seeing Dustless leave, Zetsu also escaped into the ground and disappeared. Itachi's eyes were focused on Sasuke and Deidara, who were in a fierce confrontation. It was worth mentioning that in the face of a powerful enemy, Sasuke was calm and at ease. While he was injured, he could also make Deidara embarrassed. Even because of Recto, Sasuke faintly stood on the upper hand. Boom. With a sweep of his foot, Sasuke easily kicked Deidara away. His own body was also in a mess, and many burn marks were obvious. On the other hand, Deidara flew out powerlessly like a cannonball. It's a bit unrealistic. Itachi's eyes were slightly bright, and he was surprised. He had expected Sasuke's strength to improve, but he didn't expect it to improve so quickly. Of course, when he thought of a certain time in the past, after Dustless and Sasuke came into contact, he quickly felt relieved. Perhaps it was because of the stimulation of Dustless's terrifying strength that Sasuke's strength improved by leaps and bounds. I'm afraid that Sasuke's growth should be beyond your imagination. With a slightly satisfied look on his face, Itachi's breathing calmed down a lot. His hard work over the years finally paid off. Sasuke's growth was beyond his expectations, and it was also beyond Dustless's expectations. But it's still not enough. He seems to have some disgusting insects hidden in his body. Orochimaru? With a cold light in his eyes, Itachi said coldly. In that case, this time I will end you completely. Orochimaru. The cold light gathered in his pupils reflected the color of confidence. Itachi never put Orochimaru in his heart, as if he was talking about an animal. His tone was slightly overbearing, which was the opposite of Itachi's usual calmness. Chapter 312. Itachi's dark pupils flashed with a cold light, and his murderous intent was awe-inspiring. His whole body was like 1,000-years-old ice, revealing a coldness that could freeze everything. Itachi naturally knew about Orochimaru. He had a deep yearning for the Uchiha clan's Sharingan. The invincible Sharingan was a fatal attraction for Orochimaru, who didn't have a Kekkai Genkai. This is the last thing I will do for Akatsuki, to get rid of Orochimaru. Itachi's deep and bright pupils were surging with anger, and he murmured to himself. As for Orochimaru, he didn't put him in his eyes. Under Manjikyu Sharingan, all insects have nowhere to hide. Cough! The blood in his lungs surged, and scarlet blood stains broke out of his mouth uncontrollably. Itachi's eyes became dimmer, and he quickly took out a few black pills and swallowed them. After a long time he calmed down. Aware of the rapid loss of vitality, he looked at Sasuke more firmly. In the Rain Village, Dustless and Itachi parted ways and came back again. In the small courtyard, staring at several people chasing and playing, Dustless's mouth swept a soft smile, sitting casually under the shade of a tree, quietly watching this harmonious scene. Little brat is really naive. This world is not suitable for people like you. Staring at several people in front of him, Dustless said to himself. Although he said this, he didn't have any displeasure. He just quietly enjoyed the scene in front of him. His expression was serene, and he blended into nature. Dustless-sama. Red Lotus was the first to notice Dustless's arrival, and said in a panic. At the same time, he cursed secretly. Just now he was playing with these two little girls, and he completely forgot that he was Dustless's subordinate. Red Lotus's target was naturally Hinata and Cheyenne of the Land of Demons. Wuxia nodded slightly. His clear eyes stared at Red Lotus's body. He sighed inwardly that this was also a peerless beauty. That faintly discernible bloody temperament added some enchantment to Red Lotus. Even with his willpower, his mouth and tongue were dry. The invisible charm that was emitted was the most fatal. Put away your lecherous eyes. A dissatisfied shout rang out. Looking up, it was the young girl, Ziyuan, who was glaring at Dustless. Her arms were baring her fangs and brandishing her claws. She looked ferocious as if she wanted to swallow Dustless alive, which made Dustless feel quite embarrassed. However, Dustless was an extremely thick-skinned person. In just the blink of an eye, his expression returned to normal. His expression was indifferent as if nothing had happened. The speed at which he changed his expression was astonishing. Do I look like that kind of person? That was just an illusion. Seeing that Hinata, Cheyenne, and Red Lotus were all staring at him in shock, Dustless said with a straight face, pretending to be displeased, but in fact, he was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. In particular, Ziyuan's smug little face was particularly disgusting. He's really caught in his own trap. With a wry smile, Dustless casually threw 3 rings of different colors to the 3 women, and without looking at their reaction he said softly, "Today's Akatsuki is already in disarray, and it won't be long before all of them die." After saying that, Dustless's voice stopped. Looking at the 3 women he was about to speak, but Red Lotus's voice sounded. "Dustless, Sama means that we should form a new Akatsuki." Red Lotus was also a smart person. A bright light flashed in her eyes, and she immediately guessed Dustless's intention. She looked at him in disbelief, and her pretty face was full of astonishment. The Akatsuki organization was composed of S-class defectors, including Dustless, and several super strong people. All of them had shocking strength. "Dustless, Sama, are you kidding me?" Taking a deep breath, Red Lotus touched the unique ring of the Akatsuki members in her hand, and asked in a flattered manner. Looking at Dustless's appearance, she knew that he was going to form a new Akatsuki organization. Hinata and Cheyenne looked at Dustless incredulously. In the end, those guys are outsiders, including Itachi. They are not trustworthy people. At the critical moment, they can betray us at any time. Wu Chen said seriously, indicating that he was not joking. Looking at the whole world, there was a saying that it was difficult to support a single tree. It was necessary to give these most trusted people absolute power. Among the three women, only Hinata's strength was the most heaven-defying. Otsutsuki Haguro had already implanted his Otsutsuki blood into Hinata's body, and it was only a matter of time before she awakened the Tensigen. After all, Dustless, a member of the Uchiha clan, can awaken the Tensigen. There is no reason why Hinata can't awaken the Tensigen, especially since her Byakugan concentration is extremely high. In the future, her dojutsu will definitely not be worse than Dustless. Red Lotus was second, followed by Cheyenne. As a Miko-sama, her strength was also quite good. However, this little girl was too playful, and Haguro spoiled her very much, so her strength was slightly inferior. But even so, in the face of a Kage-class powerhouse, the three women have at least a 70% chance of winning. The three women looked at each other with a warm feeling in their hearts. Over the years, even if Dustless has been very good to them, this was the first time he admitted that they were the most trusted people. Don't be modest, you are qualified. Squeezing out a kind smile, Dustless encouraged the slightly timid three women. Some people in the organization may not be as good as you. Perhaps you think that the progress you have made over the years is insignificant, but your achievements are untouchable to others. Dustless said. The members of the Akatsuki are just Kage class members, and these three beautiful girls in front of him are fully qualified. The most important thing is that compared to those sanctimonious members of the organization, the three women in front of him were more trustworthy. Even Hinata was the same. The Uzumaki Naruto of the past has become a passerby in her long life, not worth mentioning. Time is the best medicine. The light of dawn shines all over the world, and the darkness cannot hide. The new Akatsuki will be an invincible existence, like a bright sun covering the world, and the darkness that tries to resist will be destroyed. Chapter 313. Dustless always believes that it is impossible to go wrong to plan ahead. Uchiha Madara can be resurrected intact. A good plan can definitely change everything. Zetsu, is the child's game over? Raising his eyelids and looking at Inyang Zetsu expressionlessly, Dustless asked indifferently. His light voice didn't sound happy or angry, as if his emotions were taken away, and there was no emotion. It's not over yet, but that guy Deidara doesn't seem to be Sasuke's opponent, and he is at a disadvantage. White Zetsu's eyes flashed with surprise, and he immediately said truthfully. He is suppressed. Black Zetsu's voice was also not calm. Obviously, he didn't expect that Deidara, who is an S-class rebellious ninja, would be so casually suppressed, especially by a teenager. Sasuke is his natural enemy, and Deidara's jutsu is eaten by him. White Zetsu explained softly after a moment of silence. This is an innate advantage, just like water and fire. He is completely in a passive mode. But a mere 3 tomo can suppress Deidara. That kid also has some skills. Dustless smiled, and was not surprised that Sasuke could suppress Deidara. After all, he killed Deidara in the original work, and used his Chidori to suppress Deidara almost all the way. Finally, Deidara was forced to self-destruct to end his life. Dustless-sama, isn't it time? Staring at Dustless's face, Black Zetsu's eyes were blazing, and he said bluntly in a hoarse voice, we should immediately encourage Pain to attack Konoha, collect the other half of Kyuubi's yang chakra, and squeeze out his last value. In fact, resurrecting Jubi only requires a small amount of Kyuubi's chakra, but there are also flaws. Jubi resurrected in such a hasty manner is not complete. Just like when he was resurrected in the original work, Jubi without Kyuubi's chakra only has 6 tomo Rinnegan. This old guy seems to be impatient. Dustless secretly looked at Heizu from the corner of his eyes. Most of the tailed beasts had gathered, and only the last 2 were left. This old man was anxious in his heart. The plan that he had been planning for thousands of years was about to succeed. How could he not be anxious when he was kept in suspense? But it is indeed time to attack Konoha. Nodding gently, Dustless's eyes flashed with a touch of determination. As Black Zetsu said, Uzumaki Nagato's body was gradually approaching collapse, and he must be squeezed dry. A while ago, White Zetsu also reported that Uzumaki Naruto had disappeared, and there was no trace of him in Konoha's ninja village. According to Dustless's guess, that kid should have gone to Mount Mayaboku to learn Senjutsu. But this matter can be left to Obito. I don't need to participate. Dustless said coldly. Obito was more suitable for this kind of swindling. At the same time, he had other things to deal with. Itachi wanted to use coercive means to reverse Sasuke's fate, but Dustless wouldn't let him do that. It's best to let him and Uzumaki Naruto kill each other. Let him die in the hands of the most trusted person. This way of death is suitable for my stupid brother, Uchiha Sasuke. Dustless sneered. Uchiha Sasuke wanted to kill him again and again. Dustless will never let it go. If he can let him die in the hands of Uzumaki Naruto, that will be his final end. Oh, Dustless, Sama is still so wicked. White Zetsu looked at Dustless's ferocious face and couldn't help but laugh strangely. Black Zetsu, on the other hand, was unmoved. He has witnessed the rise and fall of the tide for thousands of years. Not to mention Dustless, he has seen more horrible things. The ninja world is such a cruel place. The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit, and the loser is the target of bullying. If Dustless didn't keep up with the times and stood out from thousands of mortals, he would definitely be very miserable now. Well, right at this moment, a wisp of surprise suddenly flashed past Wu Chen's eyes. The viciousness in his eyes instantly vanished, and was replaced by a puzzled expression. His face also started to change and carried a puzzled expression. It can't be that Lord Wu Chen's benevolence has been triggered, and he's planning to let that kid off, right? Seeing Dustless's hostility disappeared in an instant, White Zetsu spoke with a mocking tone. It was because Dustless won't disappear like this that he dared to do so. If Dustless was a cold and bloodthirsty person, he would never dare to talk to Dustless in such a tone. That's not it. Dustless shook his head and turned a deaf ear to White Zetsu's ridicule. Uchiha Sasuke also needs to be squeezed dry before he can be abandoned. It seems that someone has invaded the Rain Village. The sensing barrier I set outside was touched by a stranger. Frowning, Dustless expressed the doubts in his heart. Over the years he has arranged many barriers outside the Rain Village, and he can easily sense intruders. Now the mysterious intruder is obviously a ninja from outside the village, and his strength is quite good. He deftly avoided many barriers set before and successfully invaded the Rain Village. His courage is not small. I don't know how ignorant the intruder's strength is, or he has full confidence in his strength, and can come and go freely in the Akatsuki's base. Black Zetsu's eyes flashed with contempt and ridiculed disdainfully. There is a road to heaven, but you don't take it. There is no door to hell, but you are so stupid. After a while, the doubts on Dustless's face turned into ridicule, and his puzzled expression was also swept away. His scarlet pupils began to rotate rapidly, revealing the evil Sharingan. Jiraiya, this is the end of your life. Chapter 314. Everyone knows the name of Jiraiya, and his bitter inspirational history can be called a model for civilian ninja. Many ninjas in the ninja world use Jiraiya as their goal in life to motivate themselves. There is no other reason. Jiraiya is also immortal. He has no Kekkei Genkai. He has achieved his current achievements step by step. He is a model for civilian ninja to become a god. It turned out to be the guy who can use Senjutsu. The range of perception of Senjutsu is extremely powerful and wide. If it's him, he can indeed find Dustless Sama's barrier. After hearing from Dustless that it was Jiraiya, Black Zetsu's eyes flashed with understanding. Obviously, Black Zetsu admires Jiraiya very much. Senjutsu, a ninjutsu that uses natural energy, is not something that everyone can learn. Looking at the entire ninja world, the number of people who can use Senjutsu is less than 5. It's reasonable for Jiraiya, who has Sage Mode, to detect Dustless's barrier. It's a pity. With a sigh, Black Zetsu no longer said anything. From now on, the genius ninja who can use Sage Mode will disappear from the world. This kind of trivial matter should be solved by pain. But I still have some personal friendship with Jiraiya. His life will be taken care of by me. For the sake of our friendship in the past, I will leave his body intact. Wuxia spoke with fervor and assurance. His tone was meticulous and exceptionally serious. Most of the people who died in his hands were tragic. They were either brutally dismembered or directly hit by the terrifying Yasukani no Magatama. Their end was particularly miserable. The whole body can be described as a luxurious top VIP treatment. To some extent, Jiraiya is a character who runs through the entire world. Whether it is Uchiha Obito or Uzumaki Naruto, they have an inseparable relationship with him. It can even be said that Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Naruto are the inheritors of his will. Isn't this a bit of a fuss? That kind of trash can be dealt with by pain. White Zetsu frowned and was puzzled. Dustless doesn't need to deal with Jiraiya himself. Pain can easily defeat him. Dustless only needs to be a quiet spectator. Even if Jiraiya has Senjutsu, in front of Pain who has Rinnegan he is still a weak ant. Heiju stared at Dustless, and after a long time, a look of understanding flashed across his face. His tone also had a rare hint of ridicule as he said in a hoarse voice, "Sir Dustless is still a child at heart. I'm afraid this is just an appetizer before the main meal, just a warm-up." The drizzle was hazy while the horizon was dim. Lightning flashed through the sky in an instant from time to time, and it added a great deal of oppressive gloominess for no reason. It seemed as if it was the netherworld, and the village before him was isolated from the world, and filled with an indescribable color of despair. The burly man in a cloak strolled around, his eyes vaguely staring at the people passing by. His eyes occasionally flashed, taking in all the changes in the expressions of the people passing by. Although the Rain Village has come out of the shadow of war, it's beyond my imagination that peace has come so quickly. The current Rain Village is much more stable and peaceful than the era of war and starvation. The white-haired man was secretly surprised. He thought that the Rain Village should be in a period of civil strife. After all, at the end of World War II, the Rain Village was still in the era of war. Now it seems that he thought too much. The Rain Village not only ended the war many years ago, but it was also very peaceful. Even if most of these people's expressions were like Walking Dead, it silently proved that the Rain Village was now in a period of peace. Rumble. A rumbling sound came from his stomach. The white-haired man realized that he had not eaten anything for a few days and his stomach was rumbling with hunger. At this moment, there was a whiff of the fragrance of steamed ham, which made him drool. Unable to bear the call of the worm in his stomach, the white-haired man quickly ran to the tofu shop and took off his raincoat, revealing a strong face and strong body. The forehead guard with the word, oil, floating on his forehead was clearly visible. There is no doubt that only the legendary Toad Sage Jiraiya dressed like this in the ninja world. Is this guy reincarnated from a hungry ghost? He is about to be kicked into the underworld, but he is still in the mood to eat and drink. Zetsu, who was peeping in the dark, was speechless. He stared at Jiraiya who was wolfing down the food in the store in the distance, and couldn't help but ridicule him in his heart. Dustless has been waiting for a long time in the no man's land not far away. And this guy is still in the mood to eat and drink. A pitiful person must have something hateful. Black Zetsu stared at Jiraiya indifferently, without any emotion. Perhaps in his eyes, Jiraiya was already a dead body, not worthy of his sympathy. A man's words are good when he is about to die. A bird's cry is sad when it is about to die. Why are you worse than a bird? You don't have to be so ruthless, Black Zetsu. Seeing Black Zetsu's indifferent look, White Zetsu began to complain again. Hearing this, Black Zetsu's eyes flashed with a touch of ridicule, but he just said casually, "You are too sentimental, White Zetsu. Jiraiya is just looking for death. For a person who is about to enter the end, it is not worth feeling sentimental, and there is no need to reveal his true feelings. You and I are just created. The extravagant emotions of human beings should not appear on us. Completing the task is our mission. You don't know how to be romantic." Curling his lips, White Zetsu no longer talked nonsense. He just looked at Jiraiya with pity. Indeed, as Black Zetsu said, Jiraiya was caught in his own trap. This was the price of entering the rain village without permission. Once he stepped out, he would never regret it. Zetz's body sank deep into the ground, and his aura and traces disappeared. In the world of rain, there was only Jiraiya who was wolfing down his food. His desolate figure had completely merged with the entire world, and he had forever stepped into the door of the underworld that couldn't see the light of day. Chapter 315. In the world of rain, all living things were so helpless and fragile. In the face of the wrath of God, they could only let it happen. They were endlessly ravaged by the raindrops. No one could resist the force of nature. They could only bear it silently. But even so, everything has its limits. When a person has the ability to change the elements of nature, it also means that from then on, it no longer belongs to the human industry. Ring, 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 ring. The crisp and pleasant sound of the bell was like the lingering sound of the mountain spring. The oriole flew out of the valley and formed a different scenery in the dark and oppressive night sky. Finally, there was a little vitality. The black figure stood in the rain, letting the wind and rain hit him, looking very powerless. However, the strange thing was that whether it was the raindrops falling from the sky or the oncoming wind, they all seemed to be forcibly distorted by some special force. They couldn't get close to him at all. The quiet face slightly loosened, revealing clear eyes. The dark ink-like eyes revealed the light of wisdom. His eyes indifferently looked at the world in the rain, and his voice resounded through the dark void. Too slow, Jew. Ka ka ka. As Dustless's voice fell, the ground beside him burst open, and huge nepenthes drilled out of the ground, revealing a different figure. It was Jew. That guy is gnawing on the head. White Zetsu gave Dustless a helpless look, then spread his hands and said, there was a generation gap between Jiraiya's strong temperament and his style of living. It's his last dinner. Hearing this, Dustless just nodded thoughtfully, but he didn't take White Zetsu's words seriously. Jiraiya looked good, but in fact he was a rough person. If he thought that he was clumsy and negligent, he would be asking for trouble. The majestic perception spread out, and the wind and grass within a radius of several kilometers were taken into the eyes. After noticing that Jiraiya didn't appear, he closed his eyes again, and began to rest. Ju didn't make a sound and just stood quietly beside Wu Chun. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, an ear-piercing sound of thunder resounded through the clouds. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts directly detonated the sky. The dark horizon was filled with light, and in an instant, it was as dazzling as day. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. In a trance, a figure suddenly appeared on the sparsely populated land. When Dustless opened his eyes again, he could see a tall and sturdy man in front of him. Even though he was wearing a raincoat, he could still see his sturdy body. Jiraiya, long time no see. The corner of his mouth curled into a smile after a long separation. He then glanced at Jiraiya in the raincoat. His expression lowered, and his face remained indifferent. After a short reunion, they were going to be separated forever. It was better not to see each other. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. In the black night sky, there were no human sounds. What responded to Dustless was the sharp sound of several missiles tearing through the air. Old friends fight when they meet. I waited for you on a rainy day, but you repay kindness with enmity. After that, staring at the dark cold light flying toward him, Dustless's eyes flashed with contempt. He pretended to be sad and sighed. The appearance of sighing was no different from the real thing. The acting was extremely realistic. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Several black kunai shuttled through Dustless's body, but it didn't have any effect. Put away your tricks, I don't buy it. Jiraiya glared at him, his eyes were bloodshot, and murderous intent gushed out like a flood. He suppressed the monstrous killing intent in his heart and asked coldly, Kakashi and the members of Team 10 are all missing. Is it your organization's people who did it? Although he had doubts, Jiraiya was convinced that it was the Akatsuki who did it. In this world, only the crazy people of the Akatsuki dared to attack Konoha so unscrupulously. Aren't you already sure in your heart? Do you still need me to explain it in detail? Why do you ask when you already know the answer? Jiraiya. As you said, their deaths were indeed caused by the Akatsuki. casually glancing at Jiraiya. Dustless's face was full of frivolity and indifference, and continued to say, "The death of Kakashi and others was not only caused by the Akatsuki, but the person who killed them is me." Whoosh! As soon as Wu Chen's voice fell, a black shadow galloped over. In the dark night sky, there was a bright light, and a perfectly straight blue brilliance pierced through in a straight line. "You're so old, but your speed is still so fast." His eyelids gently lifted, and his eyes stared at the giant energy ball in the sky. He gently raised his arm, aiming at the huge Rasengan, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. Boom! The air suddenly groaned and invisible energy ripples spurted out from Gao Yang's arm, and went straight toward the Rasengan. Boom boom boom! Attacked by the repulsive force, the huge blue ball burst open, and the scattered energy waves swallowed Jiraiya, the caster, and the tyrannical force of the explosion mercilessly threw him out like a kite, and a deep gully was drawn on the ground. After a while, seeing that Jiraiya was still lying on the ground, Dustless frowned and said coldly, "How can such a vulgar substitution technique deceive my eyes? Quickly show your true body, Jiraiya." Boom! Jiraiya, who was sent flying before, turned into a dark green wood. Ka ka ka! The ground under his feet suddenly burst open, and a narrow and tough tongue drilled out of it, and tightly bound Dustless's feet. At the same time, a hot wave of fire came from the front. Senjutsu Gomen. Chapter 316. Dustless felt weird. Jiraiya and the two toads on his shoulders cooperated so well. If he didn't look at Jiraiya's appearance, Dustless would definitely think that he was the same kind of toad. It's hard to imagine that a person and a toad can cooperate so well. Dustless stared at the incoming fire wave and shook his head speechlessly. Gomen was used by the two toads and Jiraiya. The timing must be perfect. Any physical attack is ineffective against me. His whole body was covered with a bright golden luster, and Wuchen's body lost its texture. He simply ignored the tongues that bound his feet, and turned into a golden beam that went straight toward Jiraiya against the sea of fire. The monstrous sea of fire was ignored. Dustless's palm flashed with a dazzling light, and the high-density golden light condensed and compressed. A sharp long sword suddenly appeared in Dustless's hand, and it swept straight toward Jiraiya's head. Before the attack was launched, Jiraiya felt that there was a big guillotine on his head. This damn pervert! Jiraiya cursed in his heart, and calmly moved aside. After several battles, he already knew Dustless's ability to move at the speed of light. The biggest flaw is that he can't turn when moving, so when Dustless's body was covered with golden light, Jiraiya took the opportunity to move sideways to avoid a head-on confrontation with Dustless. Whoosh! Ka ka ka! A huge golden slash shot out from the long sword, and suddenly a slender straight trench appeared on the ground, extending straight to the distant sky. The earth was divided into two, and the soil hidden deep in the ground was directly exposed to the erosion of raindrops. His reaction is quite fast. Seeing that Jiraiya dodged the chop, Dustless nodded slightly. If Jiraiya was torn by the chop, the best outcome would be his head being separated from his body. The difference between us is just that great. It's like the difference between an adult man and a baby in swaddling clothes. Just surrender, and I'll give you the most humane way to die. On account of our past friendship, I'll leave your corpse intact. If you continue to resist, your corpse might not even be left behind. I'm not very good at something as delicate as controlling power. Dustless shrugged as he held the golden heaven cluster cloud sword in his hand. It's too early to sentence me to death, Uchiha Dustless. Looking at Dustless with uncertain eyes, Jiraiya suddenly felt a chill in his heart. He suddenly felt that his best friends in this life, whether it was Orochimaru or Dustless, had left him one after another. Maybe he was really wrong. His mind was in a trance for a while. Little Jiraiya, if you want to die, don't implicate me and the old man. You dare to be distracted while fighting with him. You really don't know how to write the word death. Shima Sunnin angrily rebuked Jiraiya. This kid is simply reckless. The two sides are originally from different dimensions. Now he dares to be careless and distracted in front of Dustless. It's no different from directly reincarnating and committing suicide. I'm sorry, Tu Sin. I was really careless just now. Jiraiya, who recovered from his reverie, smiled bitterly, secretly scolded himself for being careless, and immediately focused on Dustless. Now is not the time to be depressed alone. Don't be timid, little Jiraiya. The enemy is very powerful, but with the help of that Sama, it's not impossible to win. Fukasaku Sanin comforted Jiraiya. It's true that Dustless is unreliable, but they also have a super powerful monster on their side, and it's an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. His small toad eyes locked on Dustless, and Fukasaku Sanin showed a relaxed expression. Looking back leisurely, more than 800 years have passed in a blink of an eye. Looking at his life, he has many children and grandchildren. Even if he dies, he has no regrets. His small eyes widened in an instant. Glaring at Dustless, Fukasaku Sanin resolutely said, "As long as the strongest evil in this world is eliminated, even if I die here, I have no fear." Shima Sanin also nodded. As long as Dustless, the great villain who affects the world peace, dies, even if she really dies here today, it's worth it. In exchange for a bright future for future generations, there's nothing to lose. Well said. I'm so moved that I'm about to cry. Squeezing out a sarcastic smile, Dustless coldly mocked. A stinky toad dares to judge right and wrong, shameless. You have the right to give yourself justice, but what right do you have to conclude that I'm evil? The Kusanagi sword in his hand flashed with a dazzling light, and then it slowly dissipated, lost its texture, and finally disappeared. Cold light surged in the depths of his eyes, and chakra began to rage all over his body. Dustless's hands formed a seal, and in the blink of an eye, the seal was completed. A blazing sea of fire erupted. Fire release. Grand fire annihilation. The torrential flames whizzed through the air, reaching a diameter of 30 to 40 meters. Even the raindrops falling from the sky were instantly evaporated as they came crashing down. Is this an S-level ninjutsu? No, it should be beyond S-level. Jiraiya's face was pale. The ordinary fire release was unexpectedly used by this guy to the level of S-level. This can no longer be described with the word abnormal. At the same time, he didn't forget to take out a number of scrolls that he prepared in advance, bit his finger, and pressed them without hesitation. Bang bang bang. Accompanied by several loud noises, groups of toads suddenly appeared, and their color and shape were all different. Obviously, it couldn't be any genjutsu or clones. At a glance, there were no less than hundreds of toads. Oh, this is interesting, the toads are mobilizing. Looking at the scene in front of him with interest, although Dustless was very interested on the surface, he was very puzzled in his heart. He stared at Jiraiya's scroll and quickly felt relieved. Summoning jutsu is actually a kind of space ninjutsu. Although he didn't know what method Jiraiya used, it is a fact that he summoned hundreds of toads. Bang bang bang. Hundreds of toads in groups sprayed a huge stream of water, gathered together, condensed a majestic water source, and went straight to the fire wave. It's true that more ants can be of use. His eyes narrowed slightly. Dustless secretly thought, these groups of toads use senjutsu, and the power was many times stronger than ordinary water release ninjutsu. The two opposite attributes inevitably touched together, and the void rose into the sky with blazing steam, and everything around was covered with white smoke. Toads are lining up to die. In that case, you bunch of trash can go to hell. Dustless sneered again and again, and the anger in his heart erupted like a volcano. The blazing fire wave was enough to sweep the entire sky. Being disturbed again and again, Wuchan's heart was already full of anger. His chakra began to go berserk, and the whole earth began to buzz and tremble. It was as if the end of the world was coming, showing a tendency of collapse. Mokutan. Advent of the world of trees. Thick and solid dark green giant logs broke out of the ground, turning the surrounding ground into a dense forest. The thick and solid logs were as ferocious and terrifying as an evil beast. They swarmed towards the hundreds of toads and frogs in unison. Shodame-sama's secret jutsu. Mokutan. Jiraiya's face fell instantly. Mokutan is one of the strongest Kekkei Genkai, and there is no Kekkei Genkai comparable to Uchiha. Only the Uchiha family's Sharingan can barely compete with it. Don't panic. That Sama is here. Fukasaku Sennin's calm and powerful voice spread out along with a strong chakra fluctuation. Like a hurricane, spreading to every inch of the corner. The panicked toads calmed down. Suddenly, he remembered that the Toad King who lived for thousands of years was also here. And it was the strongest existence in Mount Mayaboku. Brats these days are all so strong. The vicissitudes of life spread out, and the breath of decay in it was full of endless emotions, and even time couldn't penetrate and erase it. The tyrannical sound waves seemed to contain magical power, causing countless ripples in the void. Boom, boom, boom. The huge toad fell from the sky, and its huge body made the earth tremble fiercely, and directly crushed the oncoming dark green wood. This group of fellows is really moving out in full force. Those damn toads! Raising his eyelids, Dustless stared at the giant toad in front of him, and he could clearly feel the huge chakra in his body. There were countless disgusting pustules all over his body, and it looked extremely disgusting. What was even more unusual was that this ugly toad had a gentle smile on the corner of his mouth. It was the great toad immortal of Mount Mayaboku. You can save the world, but you can also destroy the world. And the path you have chosen now is the path of destruction. The wise toad eyes stared at Dustless, and the great toad immortal said with emotion. This was his prophecy for Dustless, and it was the first time in his life that he had such a strange prophecy. Being able to create and destroy the world. This kind of ambiguous prophecy appeared for the first time. This guy has a huge natural chakra in his body, as expected of a monster who lived for thousands of years. The silence of the years has made the chakra in his body to be so huge. Dustless's face was full of surprise. The so-called chakra in the body of the great toad immortal could no longer be described as big, and it could only be described as boundless. What puzzled Dustless the most was what method this guy used to summon so many toads, and this was already beyond the scope of the spirit summoning technique. He lifted his gaze and looked at the so-called Great Toad Immortal. He was probably related to the old monster, who lived for thousands of years. I thought that since you have lived for thousands of years, you would have wisdom and would be smarter than these juniors. Now it seems that I have thought too much. A beast will always be a beast. How can you judge it by the standards of a human? Dustless mocked coldly, and he held a contemptuous attitude towards this so-called Great Toad Immortal who lived for thousands of years. It was fine if he hid in Mount Mayaboku peacefully, but he had to come out and meddle in other people's business and dig his own grave. Bastard! How dare you spout nonsense? Today I will let you experience the might of Mount Mayaboku. After being mocked by Dustless again and again, the Great Toad Immortal could no longer keep his face. No matter what, he was still someone who lived for thousands of years, and now he was being mocked by a junior who had surpassed him. How could he not be angry? Boom, boom, boom. The Great Toad Immortal opened his big mouth, and his big mouth that was full of mucus eventually gathered countless water streams. On the surface, it looked ordinary and there was nothing special about it, but in reality, there was a secret behind it. This guy is indeed an old monster who has lived for thousands of years. He is so proficient in celestial techniques. Frowning, Dustless's expression froze. He could clearly feel that the water streams were not ordinary. They were rapidly condensing, forming a high-density and high-pressure water stream. And there was also the presence of celestial techniques in it. Do you think I'm invisible? Do you think I'll watch you prepare a big move without doing anything? With a flash of ruthlessness in his eyes, Dustless formed a mudra with one hand, and his gaze was focused on the body of the Great Toad Immortal. The majestic chakra that contained a huge amount of vitality began to gush out, and an indifferent voice resounded through the sky. In the sky, countless red round logs could be seen faintly falling from the sky. Celestial technique, bright god gate. The black and red round dots enlarged, and in an instant, one could see the round logs that were covered by dark clouds falling. The number was so large that it could not be estimated. Looking at it, it almost covered the entire sky. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly dust flew everywhere, and the ground began to tremble. Ka ka ka. The sound of the ground breaking spread, and the ferocious cracks swallowed the surrounding ground. Many of the toads were smashed into a bloody mess. Still want to struggle? Idiots, the technique that could even bind the 10-tailed beast. Do you think it can't bind a group of clowns like you? Staring at the toads that were not smashed to death, Dustless's face was cold, and he did not hide the sneer on his face. If this group of toads could break free from such a strong sealing technique like the Bright God Gate, it would be too funny. All of you die. His pupils suddenly enlarged, and the red round logs seemed to be summoned. They began to tremble slowly, like a bottomless black hole in the depths of the universe, madly swallowing the chakra in the toads' bodies. There were even some that were directly sucked until only the skeleton was left. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the suppressed great toad immortal unleashed a furious attack. The thick water pillar of celestial technique whizzed over, and it could easily crush dozens of mountains. The sharp water cannon pressured over, and it wanted to grind Dustless into pieces. Idiot. I've said before, physical attacks don't work on me. You didn't listen at all. Shaking his head, Dustless said helplessly. The ability of elemental transformation was too overpowered, and it could almost ignore all physical attacks. Even from the moment he ate the glint fruit, the world could not touch it anymore. His body flashed with a golden luster again, and Dustless easily dodged the incoming water cannon. At the same time, the red round logs that pressed on Great Toad Immortal's body suddenly began to absorb the chakra in his body, madly swallowing everything, including his vitality. In just a few breaths, he turned into nothingness, and completely died. Jiraiya stared blankly at the tragic scene in front of him, and his mind stopped thinking. One of the 3 holy lands, Mount Mayaboku, was so easily destroyed. Suddenly, there was a sharp pain in his lungs, and he turned his head in surprise. It was Dustless with an indifferent face, and the golden long sword penetrated his body. Chapter 317. Jiraiya's pupils were gray, and his eyes were dull, completely losing the luster that a human should have. The golden sword inserted in his chest was quickly absorbing his vitality. It's over, Jiraiya. The gap between you and me has been like this since the first time we met. Not only has the gap between us not shortened, but because you're still in the same place, you've fallen far behind me. Poochie. Dustless said indifferently. As for the 2 toads on his shoulder, they had been sucked dry by Dustless's Bright God Gate, until only their bones were left. Moreover, they were already in their prime. Just a slight touch and they would turn into ashes. Jiraiya's face became even paler, and he fell to the ground helplessly. The drizzle made his face all shitty. Wuxia glanced at him indifferently. When he was about to speak, Jiraiya's voice came first. The content of his words made him frown straight. He looked at Jiraiya with a confused expression. Naruto will inherit my will and pass on the will of fire. Jiraiya's dry mouth squirmed, and he said breathlessly, and his eyes even flashed with a boy with golden hair and a sunny smile. Boring, just a little kid who learned senjutsu, and he wants to shake the world, stupid. A few months ago, White Zetsu sent news that Uzumaki Naruto suddenly disappeared, and there was no trace of him in Konoha's ninja village. According to Dustless's guess, he went to Mount Mayaboku to learn senjutsu. Dustless took back his sight from Jiraiya, and he passed by Jiraiya without the slightest pause. He didn't have much to say to a dying man. As for Jiraiya's body, it was naturally taken care of. With White Zetsu's corpse, Jiraiya's body would never rot out of thin air. Jiraiya has fallen, and now it's time to encourage Uzumaki Nagato to attack Konoha instead of paying attention to the duel between Jiraiya, Itachi, and Deidara. Dustless-sama. The ground at his feet suddenly burst open, and Zetsu's figure drilled out of the ground. He looked at the flattened ground with astonishment, and couldn't help but take a deep breath. In particular, Feng Hua's broken bones shocked him even more. Even the internal organs like blood have been devoured. It should be the wood style. Only the wood style has such a terrifying devouring ability. Heiju's eyes widened, and he took in the scene in front of him. He hadn't expected Dustless's mastery of the wood style to be so terrifying. Originally, wood style could only devour the opponent's chakra, but Dustless's move was beautiful. Unprecedented, he directly used the opponent's entire body as nourishment. His methods were truly cruel. Black Zu sneered in his heart. The more ruthless Dustless was, the happier he was. This was because such a person would not be able to control his emotions and devote himself to perfecting the Eye of the Moon plan. Compared to the hazy rain in the rain-hidden village, the sky on the other side was clear and cloudless. Deidara stared at the figure in front of him with a pale face. If his eyes could kill, Sasuke would have been a skeleton now. Deidara's piercing gaze turned him into a stick. Bastard! Are the bastards of the Uchiha family sent by God to deal with me? Deidara's face was even more ugly. He who always cared about his image couldn't help but swear. The anger in his heart had been completely ignited. His dissatisfaction with Sasuke was far more than Dustless and Itachi. Dustless and Itachi didn't need any attribute restraint, but defeated him with overwhelming strength. But Sasuke in front of him was different. He only relied on the ability of attribute restraint to defeat him. Although Ninja's duel was not despicable, Deidara's heart couldn't help but burst into anger. Losing was really humiliating. Because of Raiki, his clay bombs were destroyed by Chidori. In front of this pair of eyes, any technique you use is ineffective. Sasuke stared at Deidara indifferently. His breath was calm. Compared to the irritable Deidara, he was much calmer. He looked down at Deidara with a victorious posture. His eyes were sharp, without the slightest emotional fluctuation. Obviously, he already regarded him as a dying prey. What an arrogant look. Compared to Itachi and Dustless, you are much more arrogant. The anger in his heart was restrained. Deidara calmed down in an instant, and said to Sasuke with a calm tone. The calm tone seemed to accept his fate. Seeing this, Sasuke's brows tightened, and he was secretly on guard. Now Deidara gave him a particularly dangerous feeling. Under the calm look, there was a madness that he had never seen before. Tell me about Itachi, and I will let you go. With a sigh of relief, Sasuke decided to let Deidara go once. The people of the Akatsuki organization were complete lunatics. He had no grievances with Deidara in front of him, and he didn't want to kill him. Hearing this, Deidara just stared at Sasuke expressionlessly. Chakra's fluctuations calmed down, and the murderous aura stopped. It seemed that he was going to accept Sasuke's conditions. Since then I have hated this tone very much. It's just like those two unsightly guys. As expected of the three brothers, Deidara's eyes fell into emptiness. He began to recall Dustless and Itachi in the past. He clenched his fists, and his tone was much lower. The murderous aura that had been silent broke out again. The surrounding temperature suddenly dropped to the freezing point, and a murderous atmosphere filled the air. Under Sasuke's surprised gaze, Deidara suddenly tore his coat, revealing a ferocious mouth on his chest. You, Itachi, and Dustless all have the same tone. You always have the tone of eating others. This ridiculous arrogance, did you inherit it along with your Kekkei Genkai Sharingan? Especially your eyes that look down on my art. It makes me even more uncomfortable. This technique was originally prepared for Dustless and Itachi. Now I can only use it on you. Gotcha. After that, Deidara connected the thin line from the gap in his chest, revealing a ferocious big mouth, and at the same time, stuffed a large amount of explosive clay into it. In just a moment, Deidara's body was eroded by the black lines. In the blink of an eye, it spread to the whole body, slowly shrinking until it finally turned into a black chakra ball, floating in the air. That idiot chose to self-destruct. Zetsu, who was watching in the dark, couldn't help but admire Dustless. Because Dustless said in advance that Deidara might directly self-destruct to end himself. Zetsu didn't believe it at first, but now Deidara really intends to do so. It seems to be true. That is indeed the ultimate art in Deidara's mouth. Black Zetsu secretly murmured, thinking of the terrifying range of self-destruction, and said in horror, Deidara, that crazy madman, seems to want to kill Hoodlum together. Let's withdraw quickly, or we will be affected by the self-destruction. Half of Black Zetsu's face, which was as black as ink, became even darker. For a while, he was horrified. The terrifying explosion range reached a shocking 10 kilometers. No one could ignore his existence. But Sasuke, that kid, is definitely finished. To be honest, I don't really like him. That arrogant expression makes me want to beat him up. Whitezu laughed without any conscience. His tone was filled with schadenfreude. The people of Uchiha clan are not so fragile. I don't know if others will kill us. If we don't leave, we will definitely be buried with this land. With a snort, Black Zetsu was quite dissatisfied. Sasuke was Indra's reincarnation. He was not so fragile. Although he was also curious about whether Sasuke would be killed, compared with his own life, even the King of Heaven was not worth mentioning. Black Zetsu cherished his life more than anyone else. He also had a meticulous plan, the Eye of the Moon plan. How could he die peacefully before it was successfully implemented? Missed a good show. With a faint sigh, White Zetsu also went into the ground to avoid the explosion. As Black Zetsu said, compared with his own life, nothing was worth exchanging. After a while, the small black sphere obviously reached the limit of what it could bear. The surface of the sphere swept a dazzling white light. After the small sphere was replaced by the white light, it began to tremble and expand without limit. Boom, boom, boom. The harsh roar resounded through the sky, and the whole earth trembled fiercely as if a magnitude 10 earthquake occurred. The surface was easily torn apart like paper. Looking up, they saw the silver-white light covering the sky. In an instant, it covered the range of tens of kilometers. It was no different from the end of the world. Any matter touched by the white impact was swallowed and annihilated in the blink of an eye. Looking down from the sky, a huge crater suddenly appeared on the previously intact surface of the earth. That kid is really smart, using Manda's life in exchange for his own life. Dustless, who was quietly peeking at the situation, muttered something and nodded slightly. While fighting, Sasuke used Sharingan to control Orochimaru's psychic beast, Manda, and used reverse summoning technique to ensure that he was spared. Dustless Sama's next plan is. Zetsu's body appeared beside Dustless and asked cautiously. Deidara had already died. The next target was undoubtedly one of Dustless and Itachi. It's just two kids fighting. Let Sasuke and Itachi kill each other. After Itachi dies, I will tell Sasuke the truth about Itachi. There is no need to participate. Chapter 318. It was impossible for Itachi to kill Sasuke, but Sasuke hated Itachi so much that he couldn't wait to get rid of him. Therefore, the duel between Itachi and Sasuke was doomed from the beginning. In short, one was willing to be beaten, and the other was willing to be beaten. Both of them were willing to fight each other. Moreover, Dustless thought that there was nothing wrong with killing one of them. Compared to the scheming Itachi, Sasuke was much easier to fool. Dustless hummed a song all the way back to his home in the Rain Village. He jumped and jumped along the way. It was not difficult to see that he was particularly happy with the death of his brother. It seemed that he had seen the bitter look of the future Sasuke after he knew the truth. Dustless raised a comfortable smile. The so-called brotherly feelings had no market for Dustless. After all, Sasuke was still crying and chasing after him a while ago. Walking home leisurely, Dustless was about to comfort Uluo when an uninvited guest immediately blocked the door and stared at the smiling Dustless. If I didn't guess wrong, Itachi and his brother Sasuke, who are also your two brothers, are about to start a life and death duel. You still have the mood to smile. A beautiful woman came into view. Her beautiful eyes blinked. Every frown and smile was particularly enchanting. Her watery eyes were like gems. The person who spoke was Conan. Brother. Dustless glanced at Conan contemptuously and said indifferently, "If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I will pay them back 100 times. I didn't send them to heaven in advance, but let them live for so many years. I feel like a living bodhisattva." Conan. Everyone had their own standards, and Dustless was no exception. Sasuke and Itachi had wanted to kill Dustless time and time again. Now that the two of them had survived until today, it was already a great gift for them. That's true. Conan was speechless. Indeed, as Dustless said, Itachi and Sasuke had both exposed their murderous intent to him. Even if Dustless killed them on the spot, it was reasonable. After all, no one would let the enemy grow. To a certain extent, the fact that they were still alive today was indeed Dustless. Even if Dustless treats Itachi and Sasuke as brothers, these two brothers may not be able to be compared to Dustless, Especially Sasuke, who is aiming to kill Dustless. Cut the crap. You're not a good person. Tell me, what kind of bad luck do you have that you're looking for me to fill in your hole? Wuchen rolled his eyes at Xiao Nan snappily and looked straight at her. Wuchen asked bluntly. This little girl definitely didn't have any good intentions looking for him. Hearing this, Conan's pretty face was slightly red, and she couldn't help but feel embarrassed. She did have something to ask Dustless for help, and this help was very difficult. She wasn't sure if Dustless would agree. I hope you can go to Konoha with Pain to capture Kyuubi. You know Nagato's body. I'm a little worried about him. Facing the strongest Bijou in the legend, even if he has Rinnegan, I'm afraid he may not be its opponent. Conan gritted her teeth and expressed her inner worries. Nagato's body was overwhelmed. It's not an exaggeration to say that he won't be able to live for a few years. Now he has to fight with the strongest Bijou, Kyuubi. Only God knows the outcome. Fighting with Kyuubi means that he has to use Rinnegan's eye power. He even has to use some super powerful forbidden technique to subdue Kyuubi. It also means that Nagato has to use his vitality to fight Kyuubi. No one can afford to waste his vitality. How about it? I can meet any conditions you have. As long as you cooperate with Nagato to capture Kyuubi, I can agree to any conditions. After that, Conan looked at Dustless with hope. Her eyes were full of hope. Her low voice even had a little bit of pleading, and there was a faint crystal light gathering in the depths of her eyes. It seems that as long as Dustless refuses, the beautiful woman in front of him will cry. You are full of affection. The corner of his mouth raised a gentle smile. Dustless knew that Conan was sincere, and there was no trace of falsehood. However, this little girl often deliberately found various reasons to trap him. He couldn't just promise her. Are you sure you can meet any conditions? Dustless stared at Conan's delicate body with a smile. He was afraid that Conan didn't know what he meant. The smile on his face deliberately disappeared, and his palms rubbed each other. His eyes moved up and down, and his face was full of wretchedness, and he giggled. You Luo, that tigress, I don't need to tell you. You should know that I'm lacking a considerate maid, the kind of maid. Then Wu Chen's eyes emitted a wolf-like light. His invasive gaze instantly stripped Xiao Nan naked. His meaning was self-evident. You are shameless. Clenching her silver teeth, Conan's pretty face was pale. Although she had some feelings for Dustless, she was not straightforward to this extent. Especially at the moment when Dustless looked like this, her feelings for him fell to negative. I promise. It's just a joke, don't worry about it. After pondering for a while, Conan was about to agree to Dustless's conditions, but Dustless's calm voice suddenly sounded. The previous wretched smile quickly disappeared, and his face was full of indifference. It was the complete opposite of how he was before. Are you kidding me? Conan, who came back to her senses, glared at Dustless. Her delicate fists were tightly clenched, and white sweat seeped out. She looked like she was about to cry. Glancing at Conan, Dustless ignored her ferocious look and whispered, You should know that Nagato has stepped into the end of his life. Most of his body's organs have stopped, and he is completely holding on, Dustless said. The reason why Nagato was like this was because of the previous use of the Geto Mazo. Whether it was his soul, or the organs of his body were almost collapsed. After forcibly capturing the Kyuubi, it may not be long before he dies. Chapter 319. Dustless wasn't lying. Uzumaki was indeed a descendant of the Six Paths, but the burden of using the Rinnegan was still great. Just like Uzumaki Nagato, the burden of using the Rinnegan was huge. Because the Rinnegan didn't belong to him, it consumed several times more energy than Madara. In addition, there were many techniques in the Rinnegan that he couldn't use at all, and he didn't even understand them. I know this, but Yahiko's death was too big a blow to him, and it made him stubborn and persistent in some aspects. Of course, the main reason for all of this is because of me. Letting out a desolate sigh, Conan laughed bitterly at herself. If she hadn't been caught by Hanzo the salamander, none of this would have happened, and Yahiko wouldn't have died. In the end, it's all because of Conan. Dustless didn't agree with Conan's words. Perhaps all the fault lies with Conan. As the saying goes, the dead should be buried in the ground for peace. After the incident, Uzumaki Nagato turned Yahiko into a puppet, showing that his heart was sharply distorted. His previous worldview collapsed in an instant, and his temperament changed greatly. When is Nagato going to do it? Konoha's ninjas aren't easy to deal with. Recalling Konoha's top combat power, Dustless looked serious. Nagato going to catch Uzumaki Naruto alone is not impossible, but it's a dead end. Due to Dustless's pressure, the Kyuubi and Uzumaki Naruto have buried the hatchet. Even if he didn't want to, the Kyuubi still lent chakra to Naruto for him to use. Moreover, that kid has now learned powerful senjutsu. Nagato can't be his opponent. Therefore, it's not Nagato catching the Kyuubi, but Naruto catching him instead. Uzumaki Naruto in the Kyuubi mode with senjutsu is absolutely enough to crush Uzumaki Nagato. Rather than saying that Nagato is going to catch the bijou, it's more straightforward to say that he's going to die. We'll do it in 3 days. Conan's pretty face showed a decisive look, and she didn't talk nonsense. At present, the only one she can trust is Dustless, even if he's unreliable. Moreover, Conan has a good feeling for Dustless, and she doesn't hate him. But then again, suddenly realizing that something was wrong, Dustless secretly frowned, and a hint of doubt inevitably arose in his heart. Dustless asked Xiaonan calmly, "The members of the organization have recently died in succession, and they seem to be looking for new members. Why do they suddenly want to catch tailed beasts?" His brows tightly knitted together, Dustless's thoughts, but this time it's strange. A few days ago, Pain repeatedly ordered new members news and Sasuke's new members, but today's is to catch. SSST, T's, Sit, S is new S. Uzumaki Nagato should know his own body better than anyone else. Fighting the Kyuubi would only make his body collapse faster. There was no reason to sacrifice his life for the bijou. There must be something fishy going on. This has nothing to do with you. Do your job well. It seems that they are talking about something taboo. Conan's face suddenly froze, and coldness surged between her eyebrows, and she shouted at Dustless coldly. Obviously, Conan didn't want Dustless to be involved in this matter. You have a sharp tongue but a soft heart, Conan. There was a touch of warmth in his heart, but Wu Qin pretended not to know anything. At the same time, his thoughts became more active. Collecting the bijou is nothing more than to resurrect the Jubi, and therefore, whoever benefits the most will be the most suspicious. Nagato's plan is to temporarily replenish the strength of the Akatsuki. But the current idea is obviously the opposite, and he can't wait to resurrect the Jubi. His eyes narrowed. Dustless's first suspect is naturally Black Zetsu. This old guy knows everything. If anyone wants to resurrect the Jubi, it's undoubtedly Black Zetsu. After all, his mother is Kagaya. On second thought, Dustless shook his head in denial. Heiju was a meticulous person. He could see hundreds of steps ahead. It was impossible for him to have the eye of the moon to implement any new plans. As a result, there would only be flaws and expose him as the behind-the-scenes instigator. Abandoning Black Zetsu doesn't count. There is only one person who wants to resurrect the Jubi, and this person is also very suspicious. Damn Uchiha Obito, there is a limit to what you can do. You are so unscrupulous. Do you even put me in your eyes? In addition to Black Zetsu, only Obito hopes to use the power of the Jubi to release infinite Tsukuyomi to the world, so that he can reunite with his former first love in the world of Noara Rin's Genjutsu. Don't think too much. Just as Dustless's imagination was running wild, a dissatisfied voice exploded in his ears. He looked up and saw Conan frowning. Seeing Dustless come back to his senses, she relaxed. Dustless looked at Conan and then shook his head to indicate that he was fine. You are just a pawn, but your ambition is not small, but you don't seem to know the meaning of a man who is never content. How can a pawn like you touch the Jubi? Wu Qin sneered in disdain as a mocking look appeared in the depths of his eyes. Dust still clearly remembers that after the resurrection of the Jubi, Madara and Obito had an opinion analysis. Obito wanted to become a Jinchuriki and release the infinite Tsukuyomi, the strongest genjutsu in the world. His purpose was extremely simple. He wanted to meet Noira-rin in the world of Genjutsu. Your ambition is not small, but it's a pity that your teeth are too fragile. You don't have the strength to bite the jubi. The contemptuous smile disappeared in a flash, and Dustless recovered his calm demeanor. Among Madara, Obito, and Dustless, Obito was the most powerless, but he was the most ambitious one. Naturally, Obito was the first target to be killed by Dustless and Madara. Chapter 320. 3 days later, the spring was long, and everything was recovering, showing signs of prosperity. Dustless also quickly let go of Obito's matter, and didn't take it to heart. In short, Obito was originally a clown-like existence, but one of the chess pieces that Madara used to contain himself, and people who can be defeated by the mouth of Madara have always been the object of Dustless's contempt. Even if Obito has the essence of being a hero, Dustless still has a contemptuous attitude towards him. Compared to a peerless powerhouse like Madara, Obito is just a grain of sand on the edge of the waves, not worth mentioning. On the top of the mountain, black shadows were reflected on the ground. Looking up, he saw 3 black figures standing here, overlooking the void in the distance, with different expressions. It's worthy of being the most fertile village in the continent. Even if there is no human habitation, it's still a rare fertile land. Looking at the picturesque Xanadu below, Wu Chun sighed with emotion. Compared to the country of rain, the land in front of him was simply heaven on earth. A Xanadu where immortals were free and unfettered. No wonder other ninja villages are jealous of Konoha. Once upon a time, the land here didn't belong to the land of fire. Pain's eyes looked indifferently at the void in the distance. His purple pupils always maintained indifference, and his body floated with cold air, giving a creepy feeling. The fertile land of the land of fire today was only snatched by Hashirama and Madara in the past. Indeed. Dustless nodded in agreement. The land in front of him was also plundered, and the initiators were Hashirama and Madara. These two are absolutely invincible when they join forces. After all, there was no ninja village in the era they lived in. Madara and Hashirama just relied on their powerful strength to draw the land into a village. The strong flower of Konoha is about to wither, and the light of God will quickly catch the Kyuubi. Pain seemed to think of something, and the words on the tip of his tongue stopped abruptly. Only then did he realize that Dustless was also present. Calling himself a god in front of someone stronger than himself, this joke is not funny at all. Leave that 9-tailed brat to me. Remembering Nagato's dying body and Conan's request, Dustless said seriously. Naruto's misfortune was also a blessing in disguise. Because the Akatsuki was unscrupulous in capturing Bijou, Kyuubi was also thinking for his own sake. Now that he learned Mount Mayaboka's Sage Mode, his strength skyrocketed. The current Uzumaki Nagato was no match for him. I'll take care of 9 tails. A ripple appeared in Samsara's eyes. Pain said indifferently. His voice was very soft, but there was no room for doubt. Dustless frowned, displeasure flashing in his eyes. Naruto Uzumaki was no longer the kid who didn't understand the world. His strength improved by leaps and bounds. However, Nagato was still the Nagato of the past, and he was infected with a hidden disease. The outcome was obvious. That Tanuki brat has already. Just as he was about to persuade Nagato to give up the idea of facing Kyuubi alone, he suddenly felt cold in his palm. He was grabbed by a soft little hand. Turning his head, he saw Conan. Her eyes flashed with a different color, indicating Dustless not to say more. Seeing this, Dustless's frowning brows loosened, and he no longer dissuaded Nagato. The organization's language disappeared. He stood silently on the top of the mountain, overlooking the peaceful village in the distance. Whoosh! Several black shadows swept out one after another, jumped off the cliff, fell into the dense forest, and galloped straight toward the village ahead. All of them were wearing black trench coats embroidered with red clouds. It was the other 5 in Pain's 6 paths. After staring at Conan for a moment, Pain's eyes flashed with a complicated look. After immediately looking at Dustless, he took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Dustless, take care of Conan." Whoosh! After that, without waiting for Dustless and Conan to react, Paine's body roared out like a cannonball and disappeared in a flash. When they realized that he had left, he had already disappeared. They could only vaguely see a small black dot gradually disappearing. Dustless frowned slightly, and his heart was full of doubts. In a trance just now, he actually saw Paine's expression of facing death. Could it be that this guy is deliberately going to die? His eyes widened, looking directly at the small black dot that had disappeared. Dustless secretly murmured. From Paine's tone, Dustless heard an unprecedented relief. Is it an illusion? Or does he really intend to die by himself? It should be impossible. His dream of peace has not been completed. There is no reason to choose to embark on a path of no return. Dustless whispered in a low voice. Nagato was the kind of person who adhered to his beliefs very much. The great cause of peace had not been completed. It was impossible for him to suddenly see through everything in the world and die. Nagato. Silently watching Paine's back, Conan's beautiful and clear eyes lost their color, and they were abnormally dim. Her eyes were faintly filled with some tears. The atmosphere suddenly became sad. Nagato may be planning to end things with Uzumaki Naruto. With a complicated sigh, Dustless said faintly. His tone was neither sad nor happy. He just hoped that Nagato would not be instigated by Naruto, and he didn't expect him to catch the Kyuubi. Uchiha Obito is still calculating. He obviously has the Kyuubi-in attribute chakra in his hands, but he still instigated Nagato to attack Konoha. His goal should be the Geto Mazo and the bijou in his hands. Recalling what had happened, Dustless secretly sneered. Obito, this kid had a good plan. He deliberately tricked Uzumaki Nagato to capture the bijou. If Nagato died, the Geto Mazo and the bijou in his hands would naturally become Obito's meal. Controlling the Geto Mazo and the 6 bijou, he was definitely an invincible existence. Dustless's dry lips suddenly curled into a mocking arc. His expression was cold. Man proposes, God disposes. Obito was the one who trapped himself in a cocoon. Chapter 321. In the serene and quiet village, there was an endless stream of people. As the village with the largest population in the 5 major countries, Konoha was always a bustling scene no matter the time. The bright afterglow of the setting sun set off Konoha, and the entire village was bathed in a golden torrent, flashing and dazzling. Sure enough, it's a rotten village. Even God thinks that you're hopeless. Pain, who easily sneaked into Konoha, faintly stared at the village covered in a golden coat, and a cold mist blew out from the corner of his mouth. In his view, this scene was mourning the passing of Konoha. God is mourning the last afterglow of Konoha. The Rinnegan rippled, and an irresistible repulsive force broke out of Paine's body. Tendo Pain calmed down, and chakra began to roll violently. Shinra Tensei. The strong repulsive force was like a giant rock falling into the sea, splashing monstrous ripples, and the scattered force pulled the entire Konoha into the whirlpool, and a huge pit appeared on the ground. Although the scale and power were not as powerful as Shinra Tensei, after a long time of condensing a large amount of chakra, it was still powerful, and it caused unforgettable damage to the ground. Such a large range of movement naturally attracted the attention of Konoha's ninjas, and a large number of shadows rushed to the place where chakra erupted like ants smelling syrup. I wanted to help him attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas, but it seems that I'm superfluous. Staring at Pain above Konoha, Dustless didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He originally wanted to attract the attention of Konoha's ninjas and reduce Pain's burden, but he didn't expect Nagato to be so high-profile. Letting out a sigh, Dustless was about to withdraw and leave when an uninvited guest immediately arrived. Danzo, after so many years, you haven't aged at all. You're still very young. Leisurely looking back, Dustless saw an old acquaintance, the leader of the Root clan, Shimura Danzo. It's worth mentioning that Shimura Danzo hasn't changed much since many years ago, and he still looked full of energy. Obviously, he was an old antique from the same era as Hokage, but his spiritual and physical strength were much more vigorous than Hokage. As expected, it's Akatsuki again. A group of damned bastards, and you. The half-naked I stared at Dustless. His piercing gaze was enough to put people to death by 1,000 cuts. His eyes flashed with resentment, and he said with hatred, "That old fool Yuan Fei is really not the material to be Hokage. If it were me, your evil family would never see the next day's sun." Danzo has repeatedly advocated the destruction of the Uchiha clan, but the late Sandaime Hokage has been dragging his feet. If he had taken advantage of the fact that Dustless and Itachi were not even born, the Uchiha clan would not have ended up like this. You are right. If you were Hokage, maybe the Uchiha would have already collapsed. Dustless nodded in agreement. With Danzo's cold personality, maybe he will really eradicate the Uchiha in advance. Looking at Danzo indifferently, Dustless's tone suddenly changed as he mocked. But everything has two sides. If you became Hokage in advance, Konoha's ninja village might have already disappeared with the wind. Danzo is a radical, or rather, he advocates war. If he became Hokage, the Shinobi World War may not be as simple as 3 times. Konoha will also be dragged into the abyss by him. Bastard, you are courting death. Danzo, who didn't like the Uchiha, heard Dustless's ridicule and became angry. His eyes were instantly swallowed by dense blood vessels, and his body began to become restless. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of Dustless's strength, with his temper, he would have definitely killed him on the spot. There may be people in the world who can kill me, but it is definitely not you. With a raised face, Danzo didn't hide his sarcasm. Danzo's protest was boring and boring. Humph, half of the Kyuubi's chakra has already been taken away by you, and now you have come back. Konoha is not a place where an evil person like you can casually come. Your darkness will dye Konoha in your own color. After saying that, Danzo stared at Dustless with murderous intent, and secretly gathered chakra in his mouth. As long as Dustless shows a flaw, he will not hesitate to deal a fatal blow. What a joke. I am an evil person, yes, but you are like a mouse hiding in the darkness. What qualifications do you have to say that? And there is no place in this world that I can't go. If I don't come, no one can stop me. With a sneer on his face, Dustless sneered and condensed a golden sword in his hand. Repent in hell, you worm in the guise of a demon. There was a frosty expression on his face, as faint ripples appeared in the air. He raised his head and saw the heavenly sword of gathering clouds in Wu Chen's hand moving effortlessly. A huge slash whizzed out. It easily cut Shimura Danzo into pieces. Weak. Dustless didn't even look at Shimura Danzo's body. He directly turned around and walked away. Whoa. Suddenly, a deafening roar burst out, and the clouds in the void were directly destroyed by this destructive force. The domineering and powerful chakra turned into an endless impact, indicating its power. A golden luster enveloped the entire void. The people close to Jiraiya seemed to have a tacit understanding with the beast. Staring at the tall figure in the distance, Dustless sighed. It was extremely difficult to ignore his majestic body, and the 9 beautiful tails swayed with the wind. The whole body was completely condensed of golden chakra, and Uzumaki Naruto was clearly seen in the huge body. His small face was full of confidence, and he was full of confidence. Naruto calmly stared at pain floating in the sky, especially the black trench coat embroidered with red clouds, which outlined the painful memories in Naruto's heart. Similar to Sasuke, the demonic face suddenly appeared in Naruto's mind, and Naruto's smile suddenly froze. He seemed to see that annoying face looking at him with indifference and disdain, and his killing intent exploded. Uchiha Dustless, I will never let you go. Chapter 322. The demonic luster enveloped Konoha, and Kyuubi was no longer as evil as before. His huge eyes stared at the shadow in the sky, and he opened his mouth and spat out a small black energy ball. Pain's mouth flashed with contempt when he saw this. He hugged the sky with both hands, and the invisible energy was repelled from his body. Shinra Tensei. Boom. Boom. The dark small Bijidama was easily bounced off, and it exploded in the sky, burning with black smoke. You want to break through Shinra Tensei with such a fragile Bijidama? You're dreaming. Rina's eyes were filled with cold light. Pain stared at the golden body with murderous intent. This ugly fox boy dared to underestimate him. Although the previous Bijidama contained a large amount of chakra, its power was not as good as Ichibi's Bijidama. It's not bad. Uzumaki Naruto, who was wrapped in golden light, grinned and was immediately filled with murderous intent. The dark chakra in his palm rolled, and a high-density energy ball was thrown out. The rotating energy ball swallowed the hurricane, and its power was obviously much stronger than the previous Bijidama. This kid is really blessed by God, Dustless said with jealousy in his tone, and he couldn't wait to slap himself. When they caught the Ichibi, Naruto and Kyuubi had to come together in the face of absolute strength, and they had to abandon their past grievances, which led to their perfect cooperation now. It's better to find a chance to kill him. Narrowing his eyes, Dustless secretly decided. This kid's growth can't be estimated by common sense. There's nothing wrong with erasing such uncertainty as early as possible. While Dustless pondered, the Bijidama condensed in Uzumaki Naruto's hand approached Pain. Shinra Tensei. Pain repeated the same trick, and the repulsive force opened a perfect 360-degree defense, and his expression was calm. Boom. The invisible repulsive force turned into a hard absolute defense, and the dark Bijidama slammed into the repulsive force, splashing a circle of ripples. And then it was successfully stopped, unable to touch Pain. Shinra Tensei is really a perfect defensive move, no matter what technique it is. It can't break through its defense dash. Ka ka ka. The smile at the corner of his mouth froze, and his pupils dilated. Shinra Tensei's perfect defense began to crack, and a shattering sound came from it like a mirror. As he raised his head, the black Bijidama directly swallowed him whole. Boom boom boom. Following the explosion, a blazing ball of fire swept across the void. Black smoke burned more than 100 feet high. Suddenly, the horizon darkened. Even the Hokage would not be spared from such an explosion. Your companions might have been killed. A sinister voice came from behind. His eyes emitted a green light, like a poisonous snake, hissing. Dustless didn't even turn his head when he heard the words. He quietly looked at the fire and said calmly, "He is a man with Rinnegan. It's not right to kill him so easily." But then again, looking back, his eyes locked on the person who spoke and whispered, "You are an outsider, yet you know Izanagi, a technique that some people in the Uchiha clan don't know. Izanagi is one of the forbidden techniques of the Uchiha clan. It can instantly turn all the disadvantages of the caster, including death, into a dream, and turn all the advantages of the attacker into reality. It is an ultimate genjutsu that can freely control the boundary between reality and dream. So many Sharingans. It seems that all the Sharingans that were not taken away after the destruction of the Uchiha clan fell into your hands. There were several scarlet 3-tomo Sharingans on Danzo's arm. His arm was pale white, obviously different from the skin color of a normal person, containing a majestic vitality. Ultimate genjutsu? What a joke, so what? I, an outsider, can still control it. As if he heard the most ridiculous joke, Shimura Danzo sneered disdainfully, and his tone was filled with endless pride. As an outsider, he could control some ultimate genjutsu that even the Uchiha clan didn't know. For a certain period of time, Danzo will be immortal. A lot of nonsense. What do you want to say? A few minutes will pass in a blink of an eye. What can you do? How many times can you resurrect? How many times can I kill you? After saying that, Dustless's body flashed with a bright light, and he rushed out. At the moment when he was close to Shimura Danzo, the light beam instantly condensed, and Dustless's body instantly condensed, and at the same time, the sword in his hand also came down. Pucci. Shimura Danzo's head was directly separated from his body, and it was not difficult to see from his eyes that he didn't even have time to react before he was killed on the spot. It wasn't that Danzo was too slow, but Dustless's reaction was too fast. Dust release. Detachment of the original world jutsu. A white transparent enchantment suddenly appeared and covered Dustless, and a round ball floated in front of Dustless. The enchantment was as thin as a cicada's wing, but it was extremely hard and couldn't be broken. Dustless frowned, and there was a puzzled expression on his face. He leisurely looked back and saw a short old man floating in the sky. It was the Tsuchikage of the rock village, Anoki. There's no need to be so confused. The 5 major countries are secretly dealing with the Akatsuki, so naturally, the kage of each village will gather once. And they can't let you continue to be so lawless. And you are just so unlucky to walk into the trap. The kage of the other 4 major countries are all in Konoha. Seeing Dustless's puzzlement, Anoki coldly explained. And at the same time, the other 4 kage also came into view, and they stared at Dustless with murderous intent. This is interesting. A smile appeared on his face. He didn't expect that the 5 kage would gather in advance, and the location turned out to be Konoha. Wu Chen's gaze returned to normal. His calm voice resounded. His eyes were sharp, and his whole body was emitting an extremely overbearing sense of oppression. I have said before, in this world, there is no place that I can't come. Chapter 323. At the same time, Shimura Danzo, who was killed by Dustless on the spot, once again recovered. Boom, boom, boom. The dust escape that bound Dustless had obviously reached its limit. It swept up a dazzling white brilliance and immediately exploded with a bang. The scattered air waves swallowed and swept up the earth, leaving behind an unforgettable deep pit. Dust filled the sky, sand and stones flew. But there was no life in the smoke. Anoki's eyes were full of hope. He thought that he could kill Dustless after all. No one has been attacked by the dust release and still be intact. Unfortunately, Anoki was destined to be disappointed. Rude and direct old man, you haven't changed at all. A frivolous voice came from the dust, mocking Anoki. He didn't need to look to know that Dustless, who was attacked by the dust release, was safe and sound. You damned old bastard. How dare you blaspheme my grandfather? Her eyes suddenly turned and stared at Danzo's arm full of Sharingan. Tsunade's anger rose in her heart, and she clenched her fists tightly. She didn't even try to hide her killing intent. Her most respected grandfather's body was blasphemed. How could Tsunade not be angry? 5th Hokage-sama, although I sympathize with your heart, please understand your position. Other trivial matters can be dealt with later. The 4th Raikage was straightforward, although he was also very disdainful of Danzo. The enemy at the moment was Dustless, not Danzo, so everything can be dealt with later. His strong body stared at Dustless. The 4th Raikage didn't hide his killing intent. It was because Dustless forcibly extracted his brother Killer B's bijou that Killer B died. This was the eternal pain of the Raikage, an irreparable pain, and he lived in the shadow of hatred almost every day and night. I naturally know this, you don't need to say more. Tsunade also chose to be indifferent. She and the Raikage were both at the same level, and there was no distinction between the two of them. If they had to talk about seniority, Tsunade was slightly older than the 4th Raikage. But now this kid was scolding her, whether in her own position or in Konoha's position. Tsunade can't be weak. Tsunade's complex expression disappeared, and she stared at Dustless with murderous intent. Anoki and Gaara also stared at Dustless with their teeth clenched. The hatred between them was as deep as the sea, and there was no room for turning back. On the contrary, Terumi-me had a smile on her face as her eyes flashed with a strange luster. Mizukage-sama, now it's time for the 5 villages to fight the enemy together. Please pay attention to your position. Anoki's old face collapsed. Mei's smile made him particularly depressed. Now is the time to fight against the enemy together, not a marriage agency for you to choose a husband for you. Both the Raikage and the Kazekage frowned. These 2 women used to have a connection with Dustless, and only God knows whether they are reliable or not. Let's deal with this Uchiha Dustless guy first. His existence is the fundamental source of the world's turmoil. After he is eliminated, the so-called Akatsuki will also collapse. The red-haired boy Gaara said. He also had a deep hatred with Dustless. Even if it was only indirect, killing Dustless was not enough to calm the anger in his heart. Dustless, this is the last time I ask you. Taking a deep breath, Tsunade's eyes stared at Dustless, and her voice was heavy and hoarse as she asked. As long as you surrender, ignorant. Dustless glanced at Tsunade faintly and directly ignored her. The golden light surged at his fingertips and gathered into a round light ball. The dazzling light made people unable to open their eyes. Facing the 5 Kage, a large number of golden light balls swarmed out. Whoosh! The golden light balls were enough to penetrate the mountain, and countless sharp lights flashed. The only thing they could do was to defend. Even Raikage, who was a speed maniac, was choking. If he pretended to be hit, he would only be hit into a sieve. Tsunade's eyes flashed with despair, and her bright eyes dimmed. It was not because of the light balls in front of her. She was not afraid of death, but because Dustless mercilessly refused her kindness. This heartless man. How could he be so ruthless? I was wrong about him. Terumime's mouth twitched fiercely, and she cursed Dustless thousands of times. The two obviously had a cooperative relationship, but now Dustless obviously didn't have the slightest mercy. Even if it was an act, it was too real. Don't underestimate the power of Kage. He suddenly raised his hands, and a huge sand-shaped solid rose from the ground, condensed and shrank, and turned into a solid defense. It was hundreds of feet long, and separated the 5 Kage from the oncoming light balls. Bang, bang, bang. Without exception, the golden light balls all hit the sand-made defensive wall, leaving countless small round holes, but they couldn't break the wall. I haven't seen you for a few years, and your strength has increased. Seeing this, Dustless grinned and blew out cold air from his mouth. With a strange look, chakra began to surge out of his body. When he was about to give the enemy a fatal blow, the ground under his feet sank deep. Crack, crack, crack. The ground under his feet strangely sank more than 10 meters deep, and the surrounding soil was sealed. There was only a passage above. Whoosh! The sound of torrential water suddenly came, and judging from the flow of the water, it was quite turbulent. Looking up, it was a turbulent wave, and it almost instantly filled the square pit, turning it into a sea. They are quite cooperative. Seeing this scene, Dustless slightly nodded, showing an interested expression. He was quite looking forward to the next action of the 5 Kage. The square pit has limited the space of movement, and a large number of water gushed in. Any creature in the pit will be affected by the resistance of the water flow, and Dustless's speed will be affected. At least the 5 Kage thought so. Chapter 324. The wide pit was filled with water in the blink of an eye. Now that light-speed bastard should be restricted, right? May looked down at Dustless, who was motionless in the sea. She frowned slightly and immediately licked her thin lips, showing a puzzled look. She was very curious about how Dustless avoided the joint attack of the 5 Kage. The situation that came into view was quite strange. All around them were water sources with rapids, and from beginning to end, they couldn't get close to Wuxia in the slightest. With him as the center, a vacuum zone isolated everything was formed. In particular, Dustless's expression was particularly hateful, and he was looking forward to the clown's performance. May couldn't help but be angry. No matter how much you despise others, there should be a limit. Kazekage-sama. The hot-tempered Raikage couldn't hold back his temper and urged Gaara. His words revealed a monstrous killing intent, as if he couldn't wait to tear Dustless into pieces. Killer Bee fell in the hands of Dustless, and he wanted to pay with blood. No problem. With endless coldness in his eyes, Gaara didn't hesitate at all. The powerful and boundless chakra in his body began to erupt, and the dead sand around him seemed to be summoned by the wind god and rushed over from all directions. However, it didn't take long for Gaara's face to be covered with sweat. The weight of the sand was not light, and it was extremely laborious to control. Upon seeing this, Inoki suddenly stepped forward and placed his calloused hands on Gaara's back. Earth release. Lightweight rock technique. Gaara, who was controlling the heavy sand, suddenly relaxed. He felt that his body was much lighter, and the weight of the sand was only 1% of the original. There was no doubt that it was Inoki's masterpiece. Gaara immediately turned his head, and gave Inoki a grateful look, and immediately worked harder to control the sparkling sand. His proficiency had obviously improved a lot compared to before. This old man is finally doing something that a human should do. His rough eyes swept across Inoki's body, and the fourth Rakich's disgust for Inoki eased. After all, his father, the third Rakich, died under the plot of the rock village. Seeing that Inoki wanted to repent, the dissatisfaction in the fourth Rakich's heart subsided. Take this. With Gaara's roar, all the heavy gravel swarmed into the deep pit filled with water, turning it as sticky as paste. The resistance became even greater, making it difficult to move. In this sealed space, I want to see how you can move at the speed of light. The fourth Rakich smiled ferociously. Dustless's space had been completely suppressed, and there were only a few places where he could move at the speed of light. Don't underestimate him. After all, he's a legendary figure on the same level as Uchiha Madara and Hashirama Senju. Inoki was cautious and meticulous. Although Dustless seemed to be powerless at this time, he was like a livestock in a cage waiting to be slaughtered. In the past, he had several confrontations with Dustless. He thought that he would win, but he was slapped in the face by Dustless. And it was the kind of slap that was extremely loud. I naturally know this, and it's up to me to do it. A loud voice burst out, and the Rakich's body was covered with chakra, and the harsh roar made people's scalp numb. This state is so strong. Mei and Tsunade looked at each other, and they could see the shock in each other's eyes. The Rakich was extremely powerful at this time. The surface of his strong bronze skin was covered with dark blue chakra, and the sharp thunder could be heard. The dark blue chakra was like an unbreakable shield. Sure enough, it's not simple. It's worthy of being the Rakich who is famous for his taijutsu. He can control the power of thunder and lightning, and use chakra and lightning to reach the level of physical activation. All aspects of the body's functions are significantly improved. It's not simple. Tsunade, who knew medical ninjutsu, could see that the Rakich's move was extraordinary. It stimulated the body to the limit in all aspects of physical fitness. An ordinary human body, facing the violent stimulation of chakra, would probably bleed to death on the spot. Under the gaze of the other four Kage, the Rakich put his arm into the deep pit of water and sand. No wonder he's the leader of the village. He really can't be underestimated. Under the deep pit, Wuchen held his hands in front of him, and his body was covered with golden evil chakra, which was also a substantialized existence, and the golden sand that wanted to erode him was excluded. After quietly observing for a while, Dustless nodded, and showed a look of appreciation. First he used earth release to restrict my movement. Then he used water release to bury me alive. At the same time, he used water to seal the entire space, so I can't move at the speed of light, completely restricting my movement. Next, he used the sand that contains metal to strengthen the defense, but it seems that it's not over yet. There should be more. After carefully observing the surroundings for a moment, Dustless was cautious. These various moves were obviously the attacks of 3 of the 5 Kage, but there were still 2 Kage-level powerhouses who haven't made a move yet. Pa. Outside of the evil golden chakra, a sudden flash of silver light flashed. Dustless was slightly stunned, and the originally dark world suddenly lit up. This is thunder and lightning, so that's how it is. Looking at the bright world in front of him, Dustless's eyes flashed as if he just woke up from a dream. With the dazzling light of the thunder and lightning, he could clearly see countless golden particles floating in the mud formed by the water and sand, and looking at it, there were more than 10 million of them. The water contains all kinds of minerals, and it's already conductive, and now there are countless metals in the sand, so the water droplets will form a huge lightning net. There's no place for me to hide. Although Dustless was curious about how the 5 Kage could cooperate so well, he couldn't help but sneer. Chapter 325. Feeling the violent thunder and lightning all around, ripples appeared in Kuroto's dark eyes. He did not expect the so-called 5 Kages to be so extraordinary. If they were to work together, they could actually exert a super-dimensional combat power. Ka. When Dustless was thinking about it, The golden materialized chakra that was resisting the erosion let out a sorrowful cry. There was a burst of caw-caw-caw, similar to the sound of glass shattering, which immediately attracted Dustless's attention. Looking up, what came into view was the golden skeleton with slight cracks. It was like the ribs of a human body, tightly protecting Dustless. This unassuming skeleton was extremely strong, harder than steel. Dustless relied on this to resist the impact of the water, but now there were cracks. It was enough to prove that the change in quality after using several ninjutsu was completely estimated by multiples. It really can't be underestimated. But maybe you don't understand. Although speed is my strength, compared to this simple escape technique, absolute destruction is my specialty. Dustless whispered to himself. At the same time, high-density chakra began to erupt violently. The rich golden chakra was spotless, light and clean. It poured into the skeleton that was about to collapse and was absorbed. In just a blink of an eye, the collapsed and decomposed skeleton gathered and condensed again. It was shining with a new luster, reborn, and its strength and physique were both expanding. Its size was constantly increasing, like a hungry and thirsty baby, greedily absorbing the chakra in Dustless's body, strengthening its own body formed by chakra. Looking up, one could see an extremely huge skeleton. Its appearance and demeanor were the same as an enlarged version of a human. The golden giant's demeanor was terrifying and oppressive. The golden light from its body was like 1,000,000 degrees high temperature. In an instant, the surging sea in the deep pit evaporated into nothingness. The sand particles in the pit were directly burned into a fiery red color, and everything that could be dissolved was dissolved. What the hell is that? Why is it so evil? The faces of the villagers standing beside the deep pit were filled with fear. They looked at the giant golden head down below in shock. Through the giant body, they could easily feel the extraordinariness of that ancient aura. That spirit of daring to fight against the heavens and earth had deeply moved them. The ferocious Tengu armor challenged everyone's bottom line. That's Dustless's Kinsusinu dodge. Suddenly recalling the accident, in the Hokage's office, Tsunade warned loudly. She tensed up and stared at the towering body in horror. When she first saw Dustless's Kinsusinu, it was just a small shape, but now it has become a behemoth. So, the huge body suddenly stomped on the ground, and the golden body jumped out of the deep pit, and the body that weighed countless tons landed on the ground. Boom, boom, boom. The whole earth burst open like a piece of paper. The violent vibration was like a meteorite outside the universe hitting the earth, and the earth trembled fiercely. Cracks appeared on the ground within a radius of tens of miles. The 30 to 40 meters tall body went straight into the sky, with 2 slender Zanpakuto on its waist. It had 2 heads and 4 arms, and its crimson eyes flickered with the afterglow of a demon. The size of Kinsusinu could be determined according to the will of the caster, that is, big or small, and it could become any position. Everything was determined by the will of the caster. Dustless was too lazy to use the complete Kinsusinu to deal with them. Although the 30 to 40 meters tall Kinsusinu in front of him was still extremely terrifying, it was indeed not Dustless's complete body. What is this? What is this? Gaara choked and said numbly. It took all his strength to say these words. After he finished speaking, he was listless as if his soul had been sucked away. Sure enough, it's that kind of powerful jutsu. Inoki smiled bitterly. Kinsusinu's height was as high as the sky, and the power of the whole body was like a war god from ancient times. Its body contained invincible power. Inoki and the second Tsuchikage had experienced the power of Kinsusinu, and his understanding was naturally incomparable. This jutsu was completely in the realm of gods, and it could be called an invincible jutsu. I once heard my grandfather say that this is the Kinsusinu of the Uchiha family. Dustless used it in the past, but the Kinsusinu at that time was obviously different from the one in front of us. I thought my grandfather was talking about myths, but now it seems. Speaking of this, Tsunade clenched her teeth and was silent. If it was really as Hashirama once described, this legendary Kinsusinu could only be dealt with by a god. Don't be scared by him, stand up Kage. Inoki, who was floating in the sky, raised his arms and shouted, as if he was injected with chicken blood. His face was flushed and said, All jutsu have weaknesses that are unknown to people. This unprecedented lineup of 5 Kage joining forces has never appeared before. We have a chance of winning. That's reasonable. In addition to Terumi Mei's worried look, Gaara, 4th Raikage, and Tsunade all agreed with Inoki's statement. Dustless was powerful, but the 5 Kage joining forces was unprecedented. Especially the main battlefield was in Konoha's ninja village, and they completely had the advantage of location and manpower. I'm not interested in playing anymore. Anyway, this is a boring war to begin with. Shaking his head, Dustless looked at the 5 Kage expressionlessly. He was originally responsible for the task of restraining them, to create time for Pain to catch Kyubi. Boom! In the distance, there was another violent roar, and the tide of overbearing airwaves spread in all directions, swallowing all things in the world. They could clearly see a small black dot flying out. Looking closely, it was Uzumaki Nagato. Your companions don't seem to be able to do it, but Naruto is surprisingly strong. Gaara breathed a sigh of relief. After he and Naruto turned from enemies to friends, the two became close friends. Seeing the members of the Akatsuki being beaten and suppressed, he felt indescribable joy in his heart. Idiot, you will know the horror of Rinnegan soon. Chapter 326. The power of Rinnegan is unparalleled. It can easily create and destroy the world. The powerful sealing technique is the characteristic of Rinnegan. Some amazing worldly abilities are unheard of and unseen. Even if Nagato was weak, he wouldn't be easily defeated without a sound. Rinnegan wasn't just for show. Instead of worrying about others, it's better to worry about my own situation. You are still lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Dustless's cold eyes swept past the 5 Kage, and he smiled coldly. The cold air from his mouth could freeze time and space, and crystal snowflakes appeared in the flowing air. Kinsusanu of the Uchiha family. It's said that if you see him, you will definitely die. Sure enough, this technique can only be dealt with by the legendary god of ninja, Hashirama Senju. The 4th Raikage's strong body trembled slightly as he said unwillingly. It's important for people to have self-knowledge. The 4th generation Raikage can recognize the gap between them. Wuxia was very surprised. He thought that this muscular man would fight with him, but he didn't expect him to be calm. It seems that he's the same kind of man as Jiraiya. I can't be careless. Seeing this, Wuxia couldn't help but sigh. None of these Kage were easy to deal with. Whether it was Inoki, Gaara, Tsunade, Terumi Mei, or the 4th Raikage, they all had their own characteristics. The Raikage looked like a muscular man, but in fact he was careless. If he was really reckless, he wouldn't be able to become the commander of the ninja allied forces. The children's game time is over. Dustless's voice just fell. Kinsusanu's katana of light came out of its sheath, and the slender golden light enveloped the earth. Even if he didn't wield his sword to destroy the world, the 5 Kage were extremely uneasy. A height of tens of meters was no longer an existence that humans could deal with. Even Inoki, who had a strong will, couldn't deal with it. Is this bastard really going to kill me too? Terumi Mei's pretty face was ashen. She tried her best to remain calm. Suddenly, she remembered the covenant between her and Dustless in the past. Her pale lips raised a bitter smile. Until now, Mei hasn't received any news about Nibi's Jinchuriki. I don't think so. He wouldn't be so reckless. Shaking her head, Terumi Mei decisively denied the thought in her heart. Her eyes became firm again. Dustless and her had no conflict of interest. They even had a common purpose in some aspects. His dispirited mood was swept away. His eyes shone brightly as he stared at the golden giant that was tens of meters tall. He took this as a test of his tolerance. Under everyone's surprised gaze, Kinsusanu raised his arm high, and the katana in his hand swept in the direction of Mei and the others. So, there was a ripple in the air, and a golden light shot out like a hurricane. Looking up, they saw a huge golden light that covered the sky and went straight toward Mei and the other 5 Kage. Boom, boom, boom. The golden light along the way was like the incarnation of the law of destruction, annihilating all matter in contact with it, regardless of whether it existed or not. In the blink of an eye, they vanished into thin air. There wasn't even a trace of their existence. Their fate was too horrible to bear. As far as the eye could see, a long and narrow crack had suddenly appeared on the ground that was covered in scars. It was boundless, and it was practically impossible to see the end. It was as if an enraged god had torn it apart, and it was extremely horrifying. It's over. It's boring. Dustless sighed regretfully. His face was filled with disappointment. He originally thought that the 5 Kage could make him take them seriously for once, but he didn't expect them to be so weak. No wonder Uchiha Madara could easily kill them later. Over? Don't underestimate Shadow's power. Even if you get carried away, you should know when to stop. Suddenly, a steady and powerful roar resounded through the sky, accompanied by a strong chakra wave. The ground began to sink, especially the ground under the feet of Dustless Kansusanoo collapsed in an instant, and he fell into a deep pit. Earth release again. This little old man is really difficult to deal with. Wu Chun, who was in the deep pit, stared at the blue sky and couldn't help but frown. He could clearly see a faintly discernible black spot at the focal point of his line of sight. It was the Tsuchika Jinoki. This time, Inoki obviously used all his strength, aiming at Dustless's direction, and the silent chakra in his body began to surge. Dust release, boundary stripping technique. A white halo shone between his hands, and as Inoki's voice fell, Kansusanoo was suddenly sealed by this transparent white barrier. Inoki, this old man is really desperate and full of energy. Looking around and seeing this tough barrier, Dustless showed a playful smile. He didn't care that Kansusanoo was eroded by the dust release, and his expression was natural and leisurely. But what's the use of this? A contemptuous smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and his scarlet eyes shot out evil eye power. The power in his eyes began to rage, and the boundless eye power seemed to be able to distort time and space, and the space rippled faintly. The dust release tailor-made for Kansusanoo began to show small white cracks. How is this possible? Floating in the sky, Inoki, who was gasping for breath, widened his eyes and fixed his eyes on the transparent dust release. In the dark, he seemed to hear a cracking sound. Are you kidding me? Is he going to grow bigger? Even with Inoki's calmness, he was shocked. As the saying goes, there is a limit to everything. The golden giant in front of him didn't even have a limit. As long as there was enough chakra, it seemed that he could grow without limit. Bang bang bang. Sure enough, with the help of Dustless's chakra, Kansusanoo's body grew bigger again, and the indestructible dust release collapsed instantly, like a broken mirror. It was extremely fragile. Boom boom boom. With another slash, the deep pit that Kansusanoo was suddenly torn apart, and the dust in the sky scattered like raindrops. The great body was inevitably exposed to the air. Gulp. A choking sound was heard, and the 5 Kages, including Inoki, looked at the huge golden giant in astonishment. Looking at the big scarlet eyes, there was a fear that came from the depths of their souls. It went against the norm to grow taller by dozens of meters. It seems that Bao made the right bet. Mei smiled with joy. Fortunately, she was able to reach an agreement with Dustless in advance. In this way, the safety of the Mist Village was guaranteed. Otherwise, Mei's face would be the same as the other 4 Kages, and her face would also be ashen. This abnormal power is comparable to Uchiha Madara. Inoki's face was heavy, and his hunched back seemed to be carrying a boulder of thousands of pounds, making him breathless. Throughout the world, Inoki was the only one who experienced the horror of Uchiha Madara. But it's not impossible. Inoki's eyes flashed, and in his heart he put Dustless on the same level as Uchiha Madara. As long as they gather all the power of the 5 major countries, defeating Dustless shouldn't be difficult. When the number reaches a certain level, it can change the whole world. Everyone, the current situation is urgent. The 5 major countries should form a ninja allied forces and jointly suppress the enemy. Inoki's body fell to the ground, and he suggested to the other 4 Kages. Since the quality was not good, they could only rely on the number of people to exhaust the enemy. The enemy that Inoki mentioned was naturally Dustless and the Akatsuki. The Sand Village has no opinion, and I think the daimyo should not be willing to be someone else's puppet. He will agree to this alliance. So I agree to form a ninja allied forces immediately. Gaara agreed without hesitation. Those high and mighty big names did not want to become puppet-like existences. They had to sit on their bottomless seats and live freely. Gaara was 100% sure that the daimyo would agree with this proposal, unless they wanted to live like puppets in the future. Otherwise, they would definitely live. I also agree, Killer Bee's death must be paid with blood. Yondaime Reikage gnashed his teeth and said hatefully. His hatred towards the Akatsuki organization, or rather towards Wuxia, had reached an unprecedented level. Terumi Mei and Tsunade looked at each other and nodded in agreement. Everyone. War is the biggest obstacle to peace. The 5 major countries, as the leaders of the world, waging war so unscrupulously is contrary to peace. It's better to be quiet and listen to me. The indifferent voice seemed to appear out of thin air, and it resounded through the sky without warning. The void also splashed ripples, and a small vortex continued to expand. A figure in a black trench coat came out of it. From the figure, it was obviously a middle-aged man, wearing a mask, only revealing one eye. Uchiha Obito? What did he come to Konoha for? Rinnegan? Staring at the figure that suddenly appeared, Dustless's eyes fell on the masked man, and he began to quickly wonder what Obito's plan was. He narrowed his eyes and began to speculate about Obito's plan. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.